Hello? Welcome to Night, where the dark speaks and true stories haunt. This channel brings you real horror experiences, urban legends, and chilling encounters that people have truly lived through. Every episode is based on actual stories, told in a way that pulls you into the shadows. From haunted houses to unsolved disappearances, strange family secrets to ancient curses, we explore the kinds of stories that leave you questioning what's real. Perfect for late night listening or a lonely commute home. Subscribe and let the night in. If everyone can leave a comment to let me know where you are listening from in the world. Story 1. Each summer, a child will disappear into the forest, only coming back after years passed. 30 minutes later, a different child will emerge from that forest, last seen exactly 1 year prior. This cycle has been going on for decades, and it needs to be stopped. 3 years ago, Amelia awoke to find dozens of ticks attached to her body, crawling over her bedroom windowsills and through the floorboards just to get a small taste of her precious blood. That's how we knew my sister had been selected. She was ecstatic. Everyone was actually our classmates, our teachers, the mailman, our town's deacon, the kind Colombian woman who owned the grocery store. They were all elated by the news. Amelia's a great kid, a real fine specimen. Makes total sense to me, my grandpa remarked, his tone swollen with pride. Even our parents were excited, in spite of the fact that their only daughter would have to live alone in the woods for an entire year, doing God only knows to survive. The night of the summer solstice, Amelia would leave, and the previous year's selected would return, passing each other for a brief moment on the bridge that led from Camp Erla to an isolated plateau of land known as Glass Harbor. You see, being selected was a great honor. It wasn't some overblown, richest kid wins popularity contest, either. There were no judges to bribe, no events to practice for, no lucky winners or shoe-in for the esteemed position. Selection was pure because nature decided. You were chosen only on the ground that you deserved the honor. An unbiased evaluation of your soul, through and through. The town usually had a good idea who that person was by early June. Once nature decided, there was no avoiding their messengers. Amelia could have bathed in a river of insect repellent, and it wouldn't have made a damn bit of difference. The little bloodsuckers would have still been descending upon her in the hundreds, thirsty for the anointed crimson flowing through her veins. Every summer around the campfire, the counselors would close out their explanation of the selection process with a cryptic mantra. 17 words have been practically branded on the inside of my skull, given how much I heard them growing up. Those who leave for Glass Harbor have perfect potential. Those who return a year later are perfect. Amelia was so happy. I vividly remember her grinning at me, warm green eyes burning with excitement. Although I smiled back at her, I found myself unable to share in the emotion. I desperately wanted to be excited for my sister. Maybe then I'd finally feel normal, I contemplated. Unfortunately, that excitement never arrived. No matter how much I learned about selection, no matter how many times the purpose of the ritual was explained, no matter how much it seemed to exhilarate and inspire everyone else, the tradition never sat right with me. Thinking about it always caused my guts to churn like I was seasick. I reached over the kitchen table, thumb and finger molded into a pincer, while Amelia gushed about the news. There had been a black and brown adult deer tick crawling across her cheek. The creature's movements were unsteady and languid, probably on account of it being partially engorged with her blood already. It creeped closer and closer to her upper lip. I didn't want the parasite to attach itself there, so I was looking to intervene. Right as I was about to pinch the tiny devil, my mother slapped me away. Hard. I yelped and pulled my hand back, hot tears welling under my eyes. When I peered up at her, she was standing aside the table with her face scrunched into a scowl, a plate of bacon in one hand, and the other pointed at me in accusation. Don't you dare, Thomas. We've taught you better. I understand feeling envious, but that's no excuse. I didn't bother explaining what I was actually feeling. Honestly, being skeptical of selection, even if that skepticism was born out of protective instinct from my older sister, would have sent my mother into hysterics. It was safer for me to let her believe I was envious. Instead, I just nodded. Her scowl unfurled into a tenuous smile at the sight of my contrition. Look at me, honey. You're special too, don't worry. she said. The announcement was sluggish and monotonous, like she was having a difficult time convincing herself of that fact, let alone me. I struggled to maintain eye contact, despite her request. My gaze kept drifting away. Nightmarish movement in the periphery stole my attention. As Mom was attempting to reassure me, I witnessed a tick squirm over the corner of Amelia's grin and disappear into her mouth. My sister didn't even seem to notice. Like I said, she was ecstatic. Every kid between the ages of 7 and 17 spent their summer at Camp Ehrlich. No exceptions. From what I remember, no one seemed to mind the inflexibility of that edict. Our town had a habit of churning out some pretty affluent people, and they'd often give back to the camp that gave them everything with sizable grants and donations. Because of that, the campgrounds were both luxurious and immaculately maintained. 8 tennis courts, 2 baseball fields, a climbing wall, an archery range, indoor bunks with ASC, a roller hockey rink, etc., etc., etc. I won't bore you with a comprehensive list of every ostentatious amenity. The point is, we all loved it. How could we not? I suppose that was the insidious trick that propped up the whole damn system. 95% of the time, Camp Ehrlich was great. It was like an amusement park/recreation center hybrid that was free for us to attend because it was a town requirement. A child's paradise hidden in the wilderness of northern Maine, mandated for use by the local government. The other 5% of the time, however, they were indoctrinating us. It was a perfectly devious ratio. The vast majority of our days didn't involve discussing selection. They sprinkled it in gently. It was never heavy-handed, nor did it bleed into the unrelated activities. A weird assembly one week, a strange arts and crafts session the next, none of them taking us away from the day-to-day festivities long enough to draw our ire. A spoonful of sugar makes the medicine go down. The key was they got to us young, before we could even understand what we were being subjected to. Their teaching started to make a perverse sort of sense. Selection is just an important tradition, a unique part of our town's history that other people may not understand, but that doesn't make it wrong. Every prom designates a king and queen, right? Most jobs have an employee of the month. The selected are no different. Special people with a special purpose on a very special day. The selected don't leave forever. No, they always come back to us, safe and sound. Better, actually, think about all the grown-ups that were selected when they were kids and all the important positions they hold now. Senators, scientists, lawyers, physicians, CEOs. Isn't our town just great? Aren't we all so happy? Should we want to spread that happiness across the world? That would be the neighborly thing to do, right? What a load of bullshit. Couldn't tell you exactly why I was born with an immunity to the propaganda. Certainly didn't inherit it from my parents. Didn't pick it up from any wavering friends, either. There was just something unsettling about the selection ceremony. I always felt this invisible frequency vibrating through the atmosphere on the night of the summer solstice. A cosmic scream emanating from the land across the bridge, transmitting a blasphemous message that I could not seem to hide from. The selected endured unimaginable pain during their year on Glass Harbor. It changed them, and it wasn't for their benefit. It wasn't really for ours, either. Okay, so tell me, who was the first selected? I demanded. The amphitheater went silent, and the camp counselor directing the assembly glared at me. Kids shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Amelia rested a pale, pleading hand on top of mine. Her fingers dappled with an assortment of differently sized ticks, like she was flaunting a collection of oddly shaped rings. Tom, please don't make a fuss. She whimpered. For better or worse, I ignored her. It was a week until the summer solstice, and I had become progressively more uncomfortable with the idea of losing my sister to Glass Harbor for an entire goddamn year. How do you mean? The counselor asked from the stage. Rage sizzled over my chest like a grease burn. He knew what I was getting at. I mean, you're explaining it like there's always been a swap. One selected leaves Camp Ehrlich. One selected returns from Glass Harbor. But that can't have been the case with the first person. It doesn't make sense. There wouldn't have been anyone already on Glass Harbor to swap with. So, my question is, who was the first selected? Who left Camp Ehrlich to live on Glass Harbor without the promise of being swapped out a year down the road? It was a reasonable question, but those sessions weren't intended to be a dialogue. I could practically feel everyone praying that I would just shut up. The counselor, a lanky, bohemian-looking man in his late 50s, forced a smile onto his face and began reciting a contentless hodgepodge of buzzwords and platitudes. Well, Tom, selection is a tradition older than time. It's something we've always done, and something we'll always continue to do, because it's making the world a better place. You see, those who leave for Glass Harbor have perfect potential, and those who... I interrupted him. I couldn't stand to hear that classic tagline. Not again. Not while Amelia sat next to me, covered in parasites, nearly passing out from the constant exsanguination. You're not answering my question, but fine. If you don't like that one, here's a few others. How does selection make the world a better place? Why have we ever been told what the selected do on Glass Harbor? How do they change? Why don't the selected who return tell us anything about the experience? And for Christ's sake, how are we all comfortable letting this happen to our friends and family? I gestured towards Amelia. A pallid husk of the vibrant girl she used to be slumped lifelessly in her chair. The counselor snapped his fingers and looked to someone at the very back of the amphitheater. Seconds later, I was violently yanked to my feet by a pair of men in their early 20s and dragged outside against my will. They didn't physically hurt me, but they did incarcerate me. I spent the next 7 days locked in one of the treatment rooms located in the camp sick bay. Unfortunately, maybe intentionally, they placed me in a room on the 3rd floor, facing the south side of Camp Ehrlich. That meant I had an excellent view of the ritual grounds, an empty plot of land at the edge of camp, a cruel choice that only became crueler when the summer solstice finally rolled around. As the sun fell, I paced around the room in the throes of a panic attack. I slammed my fist against the door, imploring them to let me out. I'm sorry for the way I behaved. Really, I wasn't thinking straight. I begged, just, please, let me see Amelia one last time before she goes. No response. There was no one present in the sick bay to hear my groveling. Everyone, the staff, the kids, the counselors, were all gathered on the ritual grounds. No less than 1,000 people singing, lighting candles, laughing, hugging, and dancing. I watched one of the elders trace the outline of Amelia's vasculature on her legs and arms in fine, black ink, a ceremonial marking to empower the 16-year-old for the journey to come. I tried not to look, but I couldn't help myself. The crowd went eerily silent and averted their eyes from Amelia and the pathway that led out of Camp Ehrlich. As was tradition, for the first time in my life, I did not follow suit. My eyes remained pressed against the glass window, glued to my sister. She was clearly weak on her feet. She lumbered forward, stumbling multiple times as she pressed on, inching closer and closer to the forest. As instructed, she followed the light of the candles into a palisade of thick, ominous pine trees. Supposedly, the flickering lights would guide her to the bridge. And then Amelia was gone, swallowed whole by the shadow-cast thicket. I never got to say goodbye. 30 minutes later, another figure appeared at the forest's edge. Damien, last year selected, walked quietly into view. He then rang a tiny bell he'd been gifted before leaving 365 days prior. That's all the counselors ever gave the selected. No food, no survival gear, no water. Just an antique handbell with a rusted greenish bell bearing. The crowd erupted at the sound of his return. Once the festivities died down, they finally let me out of my cage. Over the next year, I continued to feel the repercussions of my outburst. When I arrived home from camp in the fall, my parents were livid. They had been thoroughly briefed on my descent. Dad screamed. Mom refused to say anything to me at all. Grandpa just held a look of profound sadness in his eyes, though I'm not sure that was entirely because of his disappointment in me. I think he missed Amelia. God, I did too. None of my classmates RSVP'd for my 14th birthday party. Not sure if their parents forbade them from attending, or if they themselves didn't want to be associated with a social pariah. Either way, the rejection was agonizing. For a while, I was broken. Didn't eat, didn't sleep, didn't really think much. No, I simply carried my body from one place to another, kept up appearances as best I could. Unilateral conformity seemed like the only route to avoiding more pain. One night, that all changed. I was cleaning out the space under my bed when I found it. The homemade booklet felt decidedly fragile in my hands. I sneezed from inhaling dust, and I nearly ended up snapping the thing in half. When Amelia and I were kids, back before I'd even been introduced to Camp Ehrlich, we used to make comics together. The one I cradled in my hands detailed a highly stylized account of how me and her had protected a helpless turtle from a shark attack at the beach. In the climatic panels, Amelia roundhouse kicked the creature's head while I grabbed the turtle and carried it to safety. Beautifully dumb and tragically nostalgic, that booklet reawakened me. She really was my best friend. At first, it was just sorrow. I hadn't felt any emotions in a long while, so even the cold embrace of melancholy was a relief. That sorrow didn't last, however. In the blink of an eye, it fell to the background, outshined by this blinding supernova of white-hot anger. I shot a hand deeper under the bed, procured my old little lead bat, gripped the handle tightly, and beat my mattress to a pulp. Battered the poor thing with wild abandon until my breathing turned ragged. The primordial catharsis felt amazing. Not only that, but I derived a bit of a wisdom from the tantrum. What I did wasn't too loud, and I expressed my discontent behind closed doors. A tactical release of rage, in direct comparison to my outburst at Camp Ehrlich the summer before. Expressing my skepticism like that was short-sighted. It felt like the right thing to do, but God was it loud. Not only that, but the display outed me as a non-believer, and what did I have to show for it? Nothing. Amelia still left for Glass Harbor, and none of my questions received answers. Because of course they didn't. The people who kept this machine running wouldn't be inclined to give out that information just because I asked with some anger stewing in my voice. If I wanted answers, I'd need to find them myself. And I'd need to do it quietly. For months later, I was back at Camp Ehrlich. Thankfully, the counselors hadn't decided to confine me as a prophylactic measure on the night of the solstice. I did a good job convincing them of my newfound obedience, so they allowed me to participate in the festivities. That year selected was only 10 years old, a shy boy named Henry. I watched with a covert disgust as the counselors helped him take his iron pills every morning, trying to counterbalance the anemic effects of his infestation. Everyone bowed their heads and closed their eyes. As I listened to the sad sounds of Henry softly plodding into the forest, I reviewed what I'd learned about Glass Harbor through my research. Unfortunately, I hadn't found much. Maybe there wasn't much out there to find, or maybe I wasn't scouring the right corners of the internet. What I discovered was interesting, sure, but it didn't untangle the mystery by any stretch of the imagination, either. Still, it had been better than finding nothing, and Amelia was due to return that night. I wanted to arm myself with as much knowledge as humanly possible before I saw her again. Glass Harbor was about 2 square miles of rough, uninhabited terrain. A plateau situated above a freshwater river, running through a canyon hundreds of feet below. The only easy way onto the landmass was a wooden bridge built back in the 1950s. At one point, there had been plans to construct a water refinery on Glass Harbor. Multiple news outlets released front-page articles espousing how beneficial the project was going to be for the community, both from a financial and from a public health perspective. Clean water and fresh money for a better community. When the titles read, all that hubbub, all that media coverage, and then nothing. Not a peep. No reports on how construction was progressing. No articles on the refinery's completion. For some reason, the project just vanished. It has to be related. I thought, the ticks draining blood, the idea of a water refinery. There's a connection there, a replacement of fluid, detoxification, or something. Truthfully, I was grasping at straws. Amelia will fill in the rest for me. I'm sure of it. I was so devastating naive back then. None of the selected ever talk about what transpires on Glass Harbor. It's considered very disrespectful to ask them about it, too. But it's Amelia I rationalized. She'll tell me. Of course she'll tell me. The somber chiming of a tiny handbell rang through the air. My head shot up, and there she was, standing tall on the edge of the forest. Amelia looked healthy, vital. Her skin was pest-free, and no longer pale. She wasn't emaciated. Her body was lean and muscular. She was wearing the clothes that she left in, blue jeans and a black Mars Volta t-shirt, but they weren't dirty. No, they appeared pristine. There wasn't a single speck of dirt on her outfit. We all leapt to our feet, cheering. For a second, I felt normal, elated to have my sister back. But before I could truly revel in the celebration, a similar frequency assaulted my ears. That horrible cosmic scream. From the back of the crowd, I stared at my sister, wide-eyed. There was something wrong with her. I just knew it. My attempt to badger Amelia into discussing her time on Glass Harbor proved fruitless over the following few weeks. I started off subtle. I hinted to her that I knew about the watery refinery in passing, nudged her to corroborate the existence of that enigmatic building. "You must have come across it," I whispered one night, waiting for her to respond from the top bunk of our private cabin. I know she heard me, but she pretended to be asleep. Adolescent passion is such a fickle thing. I was so headstrong initially, so confident that Amelia and I would crack the mysteries of selection wide open. But when she continued to stonewall me, my once voracious confidence was completely snuffed out. Emotionally exhausted and profoundly forlorn, I let it go. At the end of the day, Amelia did come back. Mostly, if I didn't think about it, I was often able to convince myself that she never left in the first place. On the surface, she acted like the sister I'd lost. Her smile was familiar, her mannerisms nearly identical. But she was different, even if it was subtle. An encounter I had with her early one August morning all but confirmed that fact. I woke up to the sounds of muffled retching coming from the bathroom, followed by whispering and then again retching. I creeped out of bed. Neon red digits on our cabin's alarm clock read 4:58 a.m. I tiptoed over the bathroom door, careful to avoid the floorboards that I knew creaked under pressure. More retching, more whispering. I could tell it was Amelia's voice. For some inexplicable reason, though, the bathroom lights weren't flicked on. As gently as I could, I pushed the door open. My eyes scoured the darkness, searching for my sister. Given the retching, I expected to see her huddled up in front of the toilet, but she wasn't there. Eventually, I landed on her silhouette. She was inside the shower with the sliding glass door closed, sitting on the floor with her back turned away from me. Honestly, I have a hard time recalling the exact order of what happened next. All I remember vividly is the intense terror that coursed through my body, heart thumping against my rib cage, cold sweat dripping down my feet and onto the tile floor, hands tremoring with a manic rhythm. "Amelia, are you all right?" I whimpered. The whispering and retching abruptly stopped. I grabbed the handle and slid the glass door to the side. A musty odor exploded out from the confined space. It was earthy but also rotten smelling, like algae on the surface of a lake. My eyes immediately landed on the shower drain. There were a handful of small, coral-shaped tubes sprouting from the divots. Amelia was bent over the protrusions. She had her hands cupped beside them. An unidentifiable liquid dripped from the tubes into her hands. Once she had accumulated a few tablespoons of the substance, she brought her hands to her mouth and ferociously drank the offering. I gasped. Amelia slowly rotated her head towards me, coughing and gagging as she did. Her eyes were lifeless. Her expression was vacant and disconnected. In a raspy, waterlogged voice, she said, "It's such a heavy burden to carry the new blood, Tom." The previously inert tubes rapidly extended from the drain and shot towards me. I screamed, or I thought about screaming. It all happened so quickly. Next I remember, I woke up in bed. Amelia vehemently denied any of that happening. She insisted it was a bad dream. Eventually, I actively chose to believe her. It was just easier that way. From that summer on, Amelia's life got progressively better, and mine got progressively worse. She graduated valedictorian of her class, received a full ride to an Ivy League college with plans to study biochemistry. She's on track to becoming the next Surgeon General. My dad would say Amelia had plenty of close friends to celebrate her continued achievements as well. Me, on the other hand, barely made it through high school. No close friends to speak of, though I do have a steady girlfriend. We initially bonded over a shared hatred of selection. Over the last year, Hannah's been my rock. We fantasied about exposing selection to the world at large, writing up and publishing our own personal accounts of the horrific practice, hoping to get the FBI involved or something. Recent events have forced our hand earlier than we would have liked. 3 weeks ago, Amelia died in a car crash. Her death sent shockwaves through our town's social infrastructure, but not just for the obvious reasons. Everyone's grieving, myself included, but it was something my dad whispered to my grandpa at her funeral that really got me concerned. None of the selected have ever died before. Not to my knowledge, at least. By definition, this shouldn't have happened. Does it break the deal? Does anyone know what to do about this? The more I reflected on it, the more I realized that my dad was right. I didn't personally know all the recently selected. There's a lot of them and they scatter themselves throughout the world, but I'd never heard of any of them dying before. Not a single one. Don't worry, my grandpa replied. We can fix this. It won't be ideal, but it will work. This morning, I woke up before my alarm rang due to a peculiar sensation. A powerful need to itch the inside curve of my ear. My sleepy fingers traced the appendage until they stumbled upon a firm, pulsing boil that hadn't been there the night before. A fully engorged ear tick was hooked into the flesh of my ear. I found 30 other ticks attached to my body in the bathroom this morning. On my palms, in my hair, over my back. This is only the beginning. 2. The solstice is only 6 days away. Please help me. I don't want to change. I don't want to go to Glass Harbor. I don't want to carry the new blood. First, it was Ava. Shames me to admit, but I don't recall much about her. I was 7 years old when I spent my first summer at Camp Ehrlich, and I'd only seen her wander about town with her adolescent compatriots a few times prior to that. I remember she had these soulful, white blue eyes like a newborn husky, 2 sprightly balls of crystallized antifreeze sequestered behind a pair of rimless, box-shaped glasses. That was before she departed for Glass Harbor. However, by the night of the solstice, Ava had become lifeless, borderline comatose. Selection and its vampiric ambassadors drank the color from the poor girl's face until her cold, pale skin nicely matched her seemingly bloodless eyes. Her disrepair was ultimately irrelevant. It's not that we didn't care. It's more that it just didn't matter. We all still bowed our heads and closed our eyes. As was tradition, of course, we didn't watch as Ava dragged her desiccated body into the candlelit mass of pine trees. We didn't observe or pity her frailty, because it was transient. In 1 year's time, she emerged from those pines perfected person, healthy, whole, and human, right? Then it was Lucas. He was strong but reserved, soft-spoken but sweet. Helped me up when I fell off my bike once. The pines swallowed him, too, but he did come back, right? The next year, Charlotte was selected. After that, Liam, followed by Evelyn, James, Amelia, Henry, Bailey, and Jackson. And then, finally, it was my turn. To make up for Amelia's untimely death, nature had selected me, a divine runner-up for the esteemed position. To the town's credit, they were pretty close. I've learned that 67 was the number required to fulfill their end of the bargain. Before Amelia died, there were 65 of them out there in the world. In the end, though, they failed. What's worse, they wouldn't even understand why they failed until I returned from Glass Harbor 364 days ahead of schedule. But, hey, it was a virtuous pursuit all the same. A noble cause. They did what they could to make this world a better place. Because those who leave for Glass Harbor have perfect potential. Those who return a year later are perfect. Right? Right? Tom? Tom. My grandfather's raspy voice trickled into my ears. A gentle, tinnitus-laden crescendo that exiled from my mind's eye images of all the selected who had walked this path before me. My gaze fell from the sky to the old man, kneeling near my ceremonial seat on the ritual grounds. The night of the solstice had arrived at Camp Ehrlich. Did you say something, Grandpa? I muttered. A faint chuckle left his lips, causing his bushy silver mustache to quiver. I said, "Hold still. Your legs are squirming up a storm, and this is precise work," he remarked, bringing his fine-tipped acrylic pen into view. I nodded, and he returned to tracing the vasculature of my right calf over my skin. "If you hold still, there might be time for dancing after I'm done here, you know," he declared, his tone upbeat and playful. I ignored his attempt at levity. Something he said struck me as odd. I could have sworn these markings were just to empower me for the journey to come. So, why would they need to be precise? He acted like he didn't hear me, but I felt the pen's pointed tongue falter slightly as I posed a question. It wasn't too hard for him to feign deafness, though. The ritual grounds were buzzing with jubilant noise and frenetic movement. Hundreds of kids gallivanting around a gigantic empty field on the southern edge of the camp, chatting and laughing and playing. A piano concerto droned over the camp's loudspeakers. I'd heard it plenty before, not that I could name who composed it. The tune was lively and melodically lush, but it wasn't necessarily happy-sounding. Something I'd never noticed until that moment. Bittersweet is probably the right word. I wasn't the center of attention like I imagined I'd be, either. No, I was more like a fixture of the party rather than a person being celebrated. The maypole that everyone danced around, symbolic but inanimate. Why do these markings need to be precise, Grandpa? I repeated. He pretended not to hear me better the second time around. I let a volcanic sigh billow from my lungs. The display of frustration finally prompted him to respond. "You know, Tom, Amelia wasn't like this. She embraced election with open arms. God rest her soul. You could stand to have a little more dignity. It's the least you can do to honor her memory." My eyes drifted back to the sky. I found myself comforted better by the purple-orange swirls of cloudy twilight than my own flesh and blood. Yeah, well, that was her default setting, wasn't it? More than anything, she wanted approval. You know how hard Mom was on her growing up. She was desperate for unconditional acceptance, and selection gave it to her. I don't know much about Mom's parents, but maybe if she was raised by someone more like you, she would have been a smidge more generous with her love. If I'm being honest, though, I've been desperate for approval too, even if I didn't chase after like Amelia. Never had Mom dote over me like she has this past week. The round-the-clock home-cooked meals have been nice. The way she's looked at me has been nicer. He let the pen fall away from my skin, but did not look up. That said, her grace didn't make a huge difference in the end, did it? I continued. Closed casket funeral before she even turned 21. Fell asleep at the wheel and drove headfirst into oncoming traffic. Amelia was a tiny blip on the world's radar. You know that, right? Nothing more, nothing less. She was born, selected, and then exhausted, so much so that it killed her. What a fucking miserable waste. It was hard to determine whether he agreed with me or if my indignation had made him livid. He put the pen back to my skin, shaking his head vehemently, but he did not respond to my tirade. For the next few minutes, I leaned over and silently watched him perform his cryptic duties, with the climax of the concerto blaring over the speaker system, its melody crackling with static. I noticed something alarmingly peculiar in my lethargic, blood-drained state. I don't think I would have picked up on it if I wasn't actively watching. I know it's important, even if I don't know why yet. To be clear, I wasn't alone in that rickety antique chair. No, I was utterly infested with tics. I'd given up counting the total number. The surface of my body had lost its smooth, contoured surface, and it had been replaced by a new, biologic geography. Peaks and valleys that were constantly shifting as the parasites scour my frame, seeking to excavate fresh plasma from my weathered skin. And of course, it was improper to remove any of them. Mom sure as shit beat that lesson into my head over the last week. But then, how had Grandpa been so precisely outlining my vasculature? Weren't the tics in the way? They were. That wasn't a problem. However, when Grandpa needed one to move, he'd simply tap their engorged black hides, and they'd move. Somehow, it seemed like they understood his command. I wouldn't have believed it if I didn't see it myself. Before I could even find the words to the question I wanted to ask, the concerto came to a close, and the ritual grounds hushed. Everyone sat down where they were, closed their eyes, and bowed their heads. My grandpa handed me the ceremonial bell and whispered something that pushed me forward. As soon as you step onto Glass Harbor, ring this, but not a moment before. Be strong. Don't let your sister's sacrifice be in vain. And with that, I stood up and trudged towards the nearest candle, flickering at the edge of the pines, casting shadows that writhed and cavorted over the landscape like the spirits of something old and forgotten, begging for recognition. I won't. The walk from Camp Ehrlich to the bridge wasn't long, but goddamn was it surreal. Silence was customary in the liminal space that existed between one selected leaving for Glass Harbor and the other returning. Only minutes prior, the atmosphere had been practically alive, seething with music and a chorus of different voices. Now, it was nearly empty, save the soft whistling of a breeze and the crunching of pine needles beneath my boots. Pride being selected, I adored silence. A quiet night always felt like home. Now I couldn't stand it. I knew I couldn't hear them moving. Objectively, I understood that. That didn't help me, though. It felt like I still heard them. All of them. Skittering, biting, drinking. Although the festivities at Camp Ehrlich had died down, my body remained a banquet. I tried to focus on the sensation of the bell in my hand. Previously, I had assumed the instrument was plastic. I'd never seen its espresso-colored curves glimmer in the waning sunlight. It didn't feel like plastic, though. The material was tougher, less pliable, leathery. The thin handle felt almost dusty under my fingertips. After about 20 minutes, I stumbled out onto the other side of the forest. The sun had completely set, and the distant gurgling of rushing water had thankfully replaced the silence. With the last shimmering candle behind me, I continued moving. My eyes scanned the clearing. For a second, I thought I'd taken a wrong turn within the pines. But as my vision adjusted to the dim moonlight, I saw it. I always envisioned the bridge as this ornate, larger-than-life structure, gleaming steel wires holding up a polished metal walkway sturdy enough to support parade. Anticipation had built this moment into something ethereal and otherworldly. I accepted it to be so much more. The bridge was anything but otherworldly, wooden, uncovered, barely wide enough to fit a sedan, if it could even support something so heavy. Judging by its length, it wouldn't take me more than 30 seconds to cross from Camp Ehrlich onto Glass Harbor. I ran my palm against the railing as I approached, pinky side down to avoid crushing a few of the parasites hooked into the center of my hand. The only part that did live up to my expectations was a chasm that separated the two land masses and its churning river. The water was so far beneath me that I couldn't see it. I only knew it was there because of its constant, dull roar. The sharp pain of a splinter digging into my flesh confirmed that this mystical piece of architecture was, in fact, not a figment of my imagination. I shook my hand, airing out the throbbing discomfort. It was all so mundane. Humdrum, pathetic, even. I felt my hummingbird of a heartbeat start to slow. For the briefest fraction of a moment, I found myself wondering what exactly I was so afraid of. Then, as if the universe had detected my naivety, the sound of creaking began to cut through the noise of rushing water. Someone was approaching, crossing the bridge from the opposite side. Jay Jackson? I whispered. The previous years selected made themselves known. At the age of 12, they'd survive an entire year on Glass Harbor. Wow, hey Tom. You're not exactly who I was expecting, he replied. Like Amelia, he looked well, healthy, red-blooded, and well-nourished, wearing the same denim overalls and white undershirt he left in. Glacial fear flooded down the length of my spine. Well, no time for catching up. Mother Piper is waiting for you. Ring your bell when you get onto Glass Harbor. She'll take it from there, he continued. I made myself take a step. The brittlewood moaned in protest. I couldn't move further. I was paralyzed, 1 foot on the bridge, 1 foot on Camp Ehrlich. Jackson seemed to sense my hesitation. He did not look upon it favorably. Despite being 6 years my junior and 1/3 my size, he became instantly aggressive with me. That's a direct order, Tom. Start moving, he bellowed. My paralysis did not abate. Have you forgotten your place in the hierarchy? I said, move star. Asterisk. He stopped right in front of me and gestured towards Glass Harbor. Despite his commands, I remained fixed in place. He tilted his head and shrugged his shoulders like he was profoundly confused by his inability to override my will. When he reached out to grab my shoulder, I'm not sure what came over me. I pushed him back with both hands, still grasping the bell in my right, threw my whole weight into the movement as well. Despite my tick-borne anemia, the push had considerable force, and Jackson was a smaller than average kid. I just didn't want him to touch me. That's all. Please believe me. Jackson stumbled backwards. His pelvis connected with the railing. Before he could steady himself, his body was tilting over the side of the bridge. He didn't scream as he fell onto the rocks below. He was just gone. I paced back and forth in front of the bridge, clutching my head with both hands, as if my skull would crumble to pieces if I didn't manually keep it all together. Fuck, I muttered. Previously grounding concepts like logic and rationality turned to soup in my mind. I lost all sense of reason. My eyes felt liable to pop out their sockets from the accumulating pressure of a repeating 6-word phrase. I didn't mean to hurt him. It took me a minute of panicking to remember about the items I brought with me, and the epiphany hit me like a gut punch. I scrambled to ground, rapidly untied my boots and pulled them off, laying the bell upright beside me. My trembling hand dug through each until I'd removed both insoles, and then I began shaking them over the grass. A pocket knife, a burner phone, and a compass plopped onto the dirt. It was forbidden to bring anything with you, excluding the bell. I didn't intend on leaving Camp Ehrlich unprepared, however. I grabbed the phone and flipped it open. Thankfully, I'd purged my savings to purchase the version that came equipped with a rudimentary but functional flashlight. I creeped over to where Jackson had plummeted over the railing, with visions of his misshapen, tangled limbs and splattered viscera running through my mind. I took as deep a breath as I was able and peered over the edge. It was about a 6-story drop down to the river. The water was shallow and littered with jagged rocks. The dim light only gave a general view of the area under the bridge, but I still didn't spot any blood. Jackson, are you okay? I shouted. My ragged voice echoed against the walls of the canyon. Other than that, I didn't get a response. I kept searching, praying for signs of life. I didn't mean to hurt him. At one point, I attempted to call 911. The realization that there wasn't enough signal to get my call through felt like I just swallowed a barbell. Nausea swam viscous laps around the pit of my stomach. Jackson, were you? I screamed. Then my eyes hooked onto something. It wasn't clear what I was seeing at first. Even once I better comprehended what I was staring at, it didn't make sense. Elevated above the water, on each side of the river, were long stretches of flat, bare rock. On the campside of the riverbank, I spotted Jackson's denim overalls, but his body wasn't in them. No blood, either. I backpedaled from the railing. Since I'd been selected, I'd lived in a state of perpetual lightheadedness. Sometimes it was worse, sometimes it was better, but it never completely went away. At that moment, the feeling was at its absolute worst, amplified exponentially by another damning realization. They're all waiting for him back at Camp Ehrlich. What the fuck are they going to do when he doesn't come back? The vertigo grew too heavy. I fell to the rapidly spinning earth. In the process, I accidentally knocked over the bell. It clattered against the ground behind me. The soft sound of a few muffled rings filled the air. My body erupted with movement. Somehow, the chiming of the bell had incited a mass exodus. The ticks were leaving. The banquet was over. The sensation was wildly overstimulating, but beyond welcome. I pivoted my torso, intent on ringing the bell another handful of times for good measure. I wanted every single parasite that had infested my body to hear the message. The bell was quickly becoming unusable, however. I watched in stunned horror as the instrument deteriorated into a familiar mess of silent skittering. Starting with the rim, ticks splintered off the chassis and disappeared within the grass. Slowly, an organic disintegration progressed up the device. Once the handle melted away, there wasn't anything left. It was like the bell had never been there in the first place. I turned back to the bridge. My weary heart did another round of chaotic somersaults in my chest at the sight of another figure on the bridge, one whose approach hadn't been demarcated by the creaking of wood. She waved and beckoned for me to follow. Her green eyes were unmistakable. Amelia? She never really walked, per se. Amelia would always be a few feet ahead of me. As I got closer, I'd blink. Then, she'd be a little bit farther away. My sister was like a fishing lure. As soon as I get near enough to pull her into a hug, the thing holding the fishing rod would yank her back. Rinse and repeat. Honestly, I didn't care. Real, hallucination, illusion, mirage. It didn't matter to me. It was Amelia. She didn't really talk, either. Not until I got closer to the thing manifesting her. At least, even then, the word talking doesn't really do the experience justice. It was more that foreign thoughts were inserted into my brain from somewhere outside myself, rather than a vocal conversation. A few short minutes of following that specter, and I was there. In a lot of ways, Glass Harbor was a mirror image of Camp Ehrlich. There was a bridge and the pines, then a large open field with buildings situated along its perimeter. To the untrained eye, the reflection probably would have been imperceptible, but I'd spent enough summers on those hallowed grounds to experience déjà vu as we made our way through the clearing. That's where the similarities end, however, because the buildings that surrounded the field weren't the remnants of some camp. No, it was an abandoned town. Houses with chipping paint and broken windows in the process of being reclaimed by the land. Weeds and vines growing over the skeleton of this nameless, orphan suburb. As far as I could tell, none of the buildings resembled something industrial like a watery refinery, either. That said, I didn't exactly get to tour the ruins. Amelia had different plans. I followed her to a cliff at the western edge of the clearing, where the plateau began to drop off into the canyon below. It was treacherous, but she guided me down the side of the landmass until I was standing on the riverbank. At no point did my phone have enough signal to make a call. I considered turning back. I had an exit strategy coordinated with Hannah, my long-term girlfriend. The plan was I'd enter Glass Harbor and walk due south until I hit a country road that curved behind the plateau, where she should be waiting for me. From there, I'd call her. Once we found each other, we'd leave this place forever, put it all behind us, drive in any one direction for hundreds of miles until we felt safe enough to stop running, for better or worse, though I modified the plan and continued to follow Amelia. Didn't seem worth it to live a long life blind to the horrors of it all. I decided I'd rather live a much shorter life with the truth neatly situated behind my eyes, if that's what it took. As we got closer and closer to our destination, however, I began regretting that decision. A recognizable smell coated my nostrils as we passed under the wooden bridge. Musty, fungal, slightly sweet. Didn't take me long to figure out where I knew it from. It was the same smell that exploded out of the enclosed shower when I found Amelia bent over, heaving and coughing as she drank the liquid pouring out from the invasive coral-shaped tubes peeking out of the drain. 15 minutes later, I started to see those tubes in the wild. Only a few at first, stuck firmly to the pathway we were traversing. They were all connecting the river to something further upstream, and they pulsed with a sickening peristalsis. I couldn't tell if they were depositing something into the river or drawing water out of the river. I still don't know, honestly. Tried to step around the growths initially. Eventually, though, it was impossible to avoid stepping on them. They'd gotten too large and too numerous. I could barely visualize the bedrock suffocating under their cancerous spread. Finally, the ticks made their reappearance. I didn't even consciously notice them at first, as we were nearing our destination. However, I slipped on one of the tubes. So close to their origin point, they become increasingly dilated, half a foot in diameter, give or take. Because of that, their peristaltic waves had developed significant energy. The tip of my boot got caught on the rippling tissue, and I fell forward, placing my hand on the cliff wall to avoid falling over completely. I crushed a few dozen parasites as a result. Hundreds of thousands of motionless ticks were uniformly covering the rock wall. I retracted my hand and, using the other, violently scraped my palm, desperate to expel the small chunks of insectoid debris and still twitching legs from my skin. Up ahead, Amelia waved and smiled at me, unbothered. When I looked back at where my hand met the wall, the ticks had already filled in the space and all was still. Their phalanx was infinite and unshakable. Then, She pointed at a hole in the wall beside her phantasmal body, and I felt what would be the first of many foreign thoughts being injected into my head. Mother Piper is waiting for me. In accordance with a deal made over half a century ago, I'm due to receive my portion of the new blood. No need to feel fear. Her children have done their job. My body is ripe for the transplant. After all, those who leave for Glass Harbor have perfect potential. Those who return a year later are perfect. I peered into the hungry darkness of the hole. I'd need to slide on my back in order to fit. One last time, I turned to look at Amelia. The more I appreciated her familiar green eyes, the more I came to terms with the fact that she clearly wasn't real. There was no fire behind them. They were empty, utterly vacant of the person I had cared so much about. Truthfully, her eyes weren't much different from the hungry darkness of the hole in front of me. In that pivotal moment, I devised a new mantra, something to replace Glass Harbor's hollow, dogmatic tagline. Ava, Lucas, Charlotte, Liam, Evelyn, James, Amelia, Henry, Bailey, and Jackson. Again, I told myself. Ava, Lucas, Charlotte, Liam, Evelyn, James, Amelia, Henry, Bailey, and Jackson. Ava, Lucas, Charlotte, Liam, Evelyn, James, Amelia, Henry, Bailey, and Jackson. Ava, Lucas, Charlotte, Liam, Evelyn, James, Amelia, Henry, Bailey, Jackson, and everyone that came before them. I flipped open the burner phone, turned on the flashlight, and began sliding my body into the hole. Story 2. The little people are real, and they took my sister and my brother. I'm not going to name the reservation. I don't want this to become a headline. If you know, you know. If you ever lived in a place like mine, you've probably already heard some version of this story. But this one's mine, so I'll tell it. I grew up in a small town tucked between mountains that feel older than the sky. The kind of place where you know every dog's name before you know their owner. Because everyone around you is either known as uncle, aunt, or cousin. A tight-knit community where everyone is family. The kind of place where no one would lock their doors unless they had a reason to. And unfortunately, there's always a reason. I was raised by my grandmother along with my 2 cousins. Technically second cousins, but that didn't matter. We were siblings in everything but blood. We shared a room. We shared chores. We shared every scar and every lie we told, every but whooping, every grounding. My older cousin, who I'll call T, was quiet even as a kid, smarter than me, stronger, too, the kind of kid who listened when our elders told stories instead of wandering off. I didn't. I rolled my eyes. I cracked jokes. I was always the one daring someone to do something they shouldn't, though I was usually the one doing said dare, causing trouble, running amok. And there'd be T standing right beside me. Not because he was secretly a troublemaker too, but because he always looked out for us. He always made sure we got home safe. He never partook in our schemes. He'd watch and laugh, pick us up if we fell, carry us when we were too tired, and stand beside us and take every whooping that came with terrorizing the neighborhood. He was a good brother. And then there was S, our little cousin. Our baby sister, really. I don't even want to use a fake name for her. It feels wrong. She had this chipped front tooth and the kind of laugh that made even the angry dogs in the street stop growling. She was fearless in that soft way little kids can be. Brave because she didn't know not to be yet. You wouldn't believe this tiny ball of indigenous fury could hold her own with us big kids. Though me and T were 13 and 15 respectively, S was only 10 years old. Maybe it was a need to prove herself, or maybe it was genuine youthful spirit. But she stood right beside us, causing mayhem and mischief every step of the way. She had a bit of a crush on one of the other neighborhood boys I'll call J. S.J. and I would dare each other to do the dumbest things, usually with T following us like a shadow, whether it was jumping into the nearby river with no clothes on, or running down the street shooting fireworks at nearby houses. Those were good times. The three of us were raised like siblings. Grandma made sure of that. She fed us the same food, yelled at us the same way, loved us all the same, loud, gruff, and without explanation. But if we needed it, if we needed her, she was there. Always. During our youthful days, we had a spot we weren't supposed to go. Everyone knew about it, even if nobody talked about it out loud. Just past a southern ridge, tucked at the bottom of a nearby mountain, in a thicket of moss-covered stone, was a mouth in the rock. A cave, unmarked on any official map. It breathed cold even in July. Birds wouldn't nest near it. Dogs wouldn't go close. The adults told us never to go there. The stories were older than them, passed down with tired eyes and slow voices. Every tribe around here had some version of the same thing. The little people, not fairy tale creatures, not helpful forest gnomes. These weren't things you could put in cartoons. T believed those stories. S wanted to. I didn't. I still don't. But I believed in games. I was pretty competitive. Like S, desperate to prove myself. And one summer afternoon, we dared each other. Each of us had our own paths into the cave, our own secret trail that we swore was the fastest. All the kids did. At the end of all paths, deep into the mountain, was a hollow chamber named Brave Woman's Grave. One of us, long ago, gave it that name, saying the rock in the center looked like a bed for the dead. The name stuck. We decided to race. This wasn't unusual. We'd done it before. All the kids did, and probably a lot of the adults too, when they were younger. T also did so when he was younger, before he got so stiff. He even claimed he was the fastest to ever do it. I couldn't let that claim slide. I had a big head for the little snot-nosed brat I was. God, I wish I never uttered those words. The rules were simple. No flashlights, no cheating. And the first one to reach the grave had to put both hands on the slab and say, "Here lies the Queen of Bones." Stupid, childish fun. It was tradition, at least among the youth. But before we even reached the cave, something stopped me. We just crossed the river when I looked left and saw someone standing just off the bank. Not swimming, not moving. It looked like a man in plain clothes. Just standing, facing the trail, still as beach driftwood. He wasn't anyone I knew. Not from school, not from town, not from the res. S called for me, and I turned in her direction. To see her and T waiting for me near the mouth of the cave. As I started to speak, I looked back toward the river. The man was gone. No splash, no movement, just gone. I told myself it must have been a log, or a trick of the light, since it was evening and the shadows were casting long. Or maybe even that my eyes were playing games because I wanted the cave to feel scary. I ran faster after that. At the mouth of the cave, I stood beside my siblings. T was snickering, saying things like, "Get ready to eat my dust." And S replied with words and names a 10-year-old shouldn't know. But she did. We all laughed at her vulgarness. And then we lined up side by side like always, just for the last time. 1, 2, 3. My trail into the grave curved through a narrow passage that dropped down a 6-foot stone chute. The only way back up was to press your feet against one wall, your shoulders against the other, and shimmy until your ribs ached. I liked it. It made me feel like the cave didn't want me there, and I beat it anyway. I made it first. It was easy getting there and easy getting back, because years of exploring youths had left many chalk markings indicating certain paths to and from the grave. Even on your own secret trail, it was easy to find these markings. So rarely, if at all, did anyone actually get lost. My voice echoed when I called it out. "Here lies the Queen of Bones." No one answered. I waited, sitting on the stone slab in the middle of the hollow. The grave was always cold, colder than the rest of the cave. It smelled like dust and rust and something older, something damp. Then I heard it. Not footsteps, but a scraping sound, a shuffle of pebbles. Then silence. I called out, thinking it was T. No reply. Then more sounds. Scratching. A fast skittering noise overhead, like nails dragging across stone. I looked up. Nothing. The grave echoed everything. I heard a breath I didn't think was mine. I felt watched. I felt a sense of dread I'd never felt at that time in my life. Memories of those scary stories from years earlier. The folk tales the elders would share late into the nights of powwows and ceremonies. Stories of those small demons known as Nemeriger or the Little People. They were old, wild, and cruel. Small only in stature, not in strength. They'd mimic voices, slip into your dreams, steal children, and leave behind strange carvings in the dirt. They'd crawl on the ceilings and whisper from holes in the walls. They lived under mountains and knew the caves better than light ever could. These small cave dwellers who would come out of their underground homes to grab children, like us, who strayed too far into the woods and mountains, dragging them deep into tunnels much too small for their bodies to fit completely. But they'd pull them anyway, leaving behind only what couldn't. My heart started racing twice as fast as I looked all around. The cracks in the roof letting in the last dying embers of sunlight, just enough for me to see shapes and shadows. But the dark around me grew slowly more suffocating as the noises grew louder. And then I saw it, a blur of movement, low and fast, darting between two rocks. I thought I saw fingers, a face, a grin stretched too wide. It's them, it's really them, I thought, as despair gripped my throat, strangling out the last bit of air in my lungs. This is it. Why didn't I listen? Is what I would have thought. It said blur didn't stop in the middle of the last, dwindling sunlight in the cave. For just a second, I believed it. I felt every story we'd ever been told crack open inside my chest like a broken levee. A harsh, unforgiving wave of hindsight overwhelming me, drowning me in an ocean of if-onlys. Then it barked. A coyote. Scrawny. Half-blind, fur matted and stomach hollow, probably more terrified than I was just a moment ago. I coughed out a dry laugh at the realization, the abrupt sound scaring off the little mutt. It slipped through a narrow gap behind the altar and vanished. I exhaled heavily again, this time so hard I coughed up a fit. Jesus, I whispered. I almost believed it. I stood and climbed out, away from the grave, scraping my back on the way up, and followed the white chalk marks back toward the surface. When I got to the cave's mouth, T was already there. He grinned. Took you long enough. Get out of here, I said. I was waiting for you. We threw jabs, elbowed each other, talked trash the way cousins do when neither of them wants to admit they were scared. Then we waited. We waited longer. S didn't come out. At first, we joked. Said she probably got turned around or stopped to dig the cobwebs out of her braids. We stood at the mouth of the cave, peering in. She wasn't there. We waited. The sun dipped lower. We waited more. We called her name. We yelled louder. Then we started running. We told the adults. The adults called everyone else. The uncles, the cousins, the old aunties who never left their porches. Even the medicine woman came. Then the cops. They brought flashlights and dogs and men with radios who didn't bother hiding their annoyance. They found her shoe tucked just inside the cave's entrance. A trail of footprints, half erased by time and shifting stone. Another shoe farther in. Then nothing. I told one of the officers, I saw a man at the river, but he looked at me like I told him it was Bigfoot. Then he scribbled something in a notebook and never asked again. The other officers said things like she must have wandered off, or fallen, or gotten scared and hidden. The tribal search parties kept looking for 2 weeks. The police stopped after 3 days. She was never found. Story 3. My brother is downstairs watching TV, but we buried him a week ago. It had been 10 years since I was last home, since I last walked through the large blue door with the welcome mat out front. They tried to resell the house after we left. Well, forced out would be more accurate. They never could sell the house. It was kind of hard to sell a house with the stigma of a suicide attached to it. For 10 years, I've been haunted by that day, the day my father took his own life, the day my mother lost her mind, the day my brother came back from the dead. my brother Max, had disappeared during the last few days of his camping trip. He went to a camp called Camp Mandatory, right outside of that freaky town called Sleepy Falls. It was one of those small towns that had existed since colonial times but wasn't on any map, and the only way you could find it is if you'd been there before or someone who'd been there before showed you the way. When we got word that Max went missing, we drove the 4 hours to Camp Mandatory to assist in the search. My dad stayed silent the whole trip, and so did I. The silence in the car was broken by my mother's occasional sobs and repeating to herself, "My baby boy will find you." When we reached the town of Sleepy Falls, we cut through the market district since it was the fastest route to the camp. Shopkeepers and shoppers alike stepped out of their stores and just stared at us as we drove by. No smiles, no waves, they just stared. I remember when we visited this place years ago. I was just a kid, but something about this town rubbed me the wrong way. When we arrived at the camp, we were greeted by a tall, skinny man with dark hair cut into a bowl cut and dark-rimmed glasses. "Hello, my name is Simon. I'm one of the counselors here. You must be the Turners." The skinny man said, extending his hand out to my father, "Grant, this is my wife Nicole and my daughter Riley." My dad answered as he firmly shook Simon's hand. Simon looked at my mother and me, and then back to my father. "We're doing all we can to look for Max. We have the local sheriff and his 2 deputies helping in the search." He said, "That's it? Just the sheriff and his 2 lackeys? Where's the police?" "The FBI." I demanded, "This is my brother we're talking about." "Riley, be silent." My father yelled. I shut up quickly. My father wasn't a loud man. He got angry and raised his voice hardly ever. So when he did, it was always a surprise. The town would prefer to keep this a localized event for now. Besides, we also have all of the counselors and volunteer campers assisting in the search. Simon smiled. "We'll help too," my father said. My mother and I nodded in agreement. The search lasted all through the night and into the early morning. We would take shifts during the search. One party would go through the woods to search, while the other stayed at camp and rested until the group switched. I was a part of the night search along with my dad and Simon. We never found anything during our search. No clothing, no blood, no answers to our calls. When we returned to camp to switch parties, the sun was barely peeking through the trees. "Coffee?" Simon asked, holding 2 coffee cups and offering one of them to me. "Sure, thanks," I answered, taking the blue cup from his hand. He looked at me for a moment, attempting to read me. Maybe he was trying to find words to say to me. "Can I help you with something?" I asked. "Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to stare." He answered, "No, I'm sorry. That was rude of me." I sighed. Simon was maybe a year or 2 older than me. I'm sure he's worried about Max too, having spent the last couple of months with him. Maybe he had a younger brother also and felt empathetic. "Do you travel here to volunteer at the camp every year?" I asked, trying to make small talk. "Oh, actually I'm a local. I live in town with my uncle." He answered, "Oh, I see. Hey, is the town always this weird when people travel through it?" I asked, "Weird? Oh, well, we don't get a lot of outsiders here. So whenever someone travels through, people get curious." He laughed. "Curious? Those looks we got were not the looks of curiosity. They were the look that said, 'You don't belong here.' So, if you're a native to the area, you should know these woods pretty well, huh?" I suggested. "Not really. The woods always change after summer." He said, "What do you mean by that?" I asked. He looked back at me with panic written all over his face. "Oh, it's just a say we have around here. Like when the seasons change. So do the trees. And you know every tree looks the same." He laughed nervously. Before I could pry further, one of the sheriff's deputies came running back into camp. "We found something," he said, out of breath. My dad immediately jumped out his chair. He wobbled for a moment from exhaustion, but immediately began walking towards a deputy. "Show me," he demanded. The deputy nodded in agreement and took my dad into the forest. They found my brother. He was dead. Exposure was ruled the cause of death. They found his body naked, lying face down in a creek. They explained this as a phenomenon that happens during events of hypothermia. His back was torn open, exposing his spine, and some of his organs were missing. They explained this with animal predation. The drive home was quiet, quieter than the drive there. My mother didn't cry. She was still in shock. I tried to hold everything in. I wanted to cry. I wanted to throw up, and I wanted to die. I didn't want to feel this kind of pain. My father, as per usual, didn't say a word, quiet and stoic, as always. The funeral was a few weeks later, open casket. The mortuary did a good job making Max look as close to alive as he could be. I had hoped he would just hop up and tell us it was all an elaborate prank, but he never jumped up, never smiled, and never laughed. I missed his laugh. "Hey, Riley, I'm sorry for your loss." A short, chubby kid with a crew cut said to me, "Oh, hey, Benny, I didn't recognize you. You got a haircut?" I asked. "Yeah, my mom said my hair was an appropriate length for a funeral." He said, brushing his hand against his short hair. "I fucked up." Benny began to cry. If I didn't get summer school, I could have been there with Max. I could have watched his back, made sure he stayed safe. He sobbed. I wrapped my arms around him and pulled him in close to comfort him. I patted his back to give him a bit of security. As I did, I could feel something poke against my leg. "You, Benny, what the fuck?" I asked as I pushed him away. "Sorry, I've never been hugged by a girl before. Not one that wasn't my mom." He said, wiping away his tears. It's okay." I said. When we returned home, my dad locked himself in the den and my mom just began cooking all of Max's favorite dishes and cleaning the kitchen over and over again. A week had passed. My dad never came out of the den, took his meals in there, and only ever came out to go to the bathroom and occasionally shower. My mom slept in Max's room on his bed and said it still smelled like him. I could hear her cries at night, muffled in his pillow and by my wall. There were nights when I wanted to sneak out, but I could never bring myself to leave. One morning, I was up in my room just listening to music, staring at the posters that littered my ceiling. I heard a loud pop downstairs. I immediately jumped up and ran out the door and down the stairs. What the fuck happened? I screamed as I entered the kitchen. What I saw down there, I couldn't explain. It was my brother, or someone that looked like my brother, being embraced by my mother. It looked like Max, but not right. His skin hung wrong on his body, like a sheet covering a coat rack. It wasn't Max, not the one we buried, but something trying to imitate him. What the fuck? I screamed as I turned around and ran back upstairs and slammed my bedroom door. I looked at my bed and saw the cordless phone lying on it. I immediately picked it up and called 911. I could hear a small click in between the rings. It was a sound I knew all too well when Max used to listen in on my conversations with my friends. It was listening. 911, what is your emergency? The operator asked. Hello? Please send help. I'm at 3232 West Holly Lane. I said desperately. What is happening there? The operator asked. It's my brother. He's downstairs with my mother. I think my father shot himself. I cried. Your father shot himself. Okay, we'll send a cruiser and an ambulance your way. The operator said, No, that's not it. My brother disappeared a month ago at summer camp. They found his body in the woods. We buried him last week. That thing downstairs is not my brother. I screamed. I couldn't help but break down and cry. Ma'am, can you repeat that? Is this a prank call? The operator asked on the line. Help! There's an intruder in my house. I'm in danger and my mom is in danger. He shot my father. Help! I screamed as I hung up the phone, hoping they'd take me seriously. I had to escape somehow to save Mom. I thought to myself. That's when I heard a knock at my door. All right, Riley, let me in. Let's see cartoons together. The voice said on the other side of my door. I quickly, but quietly, began to open my window leading outside. All right, Riley, Mom had made pancakes. See, come on down. The voice continued. It sounded like Max, but not like Max. It sounded like someone trying to imitate Max's voice as cadence, but not quite getting it. I began to climb down. I'd made this climb dozens of times before, but I was always able to take my time. I was about halfway down when I began to hear something slamming into my door upstairs. I heard my door cracking and splintering with each slam against it. I didn't have time to finish the climb. I had to jump the rest of the way. It was about another 10 feet down, but I didn't want to accidentally twist my ankle or something. I aimed for the bushes below. Landing was a bit rough, but the worst I got was some scratches from thorns and branches in the bushes. I couldn't go back through the front door to get Mom. I needed to arm myself. I had to go through the window in the study. It was a tight fit, but I pushed my way through. My dad sat in the chair, his mouth agape. A crown of bone and brains adorned the back of his head. His cherished 1911 was on the floor next to him. Scattered through the den were various plates of half-eaten food and a lot of crumpled up paper. Upon further inspection of the notes, I realized they were suicide notes. My dad had been planning on ending his own life for days, and finally seeing that thing wearing my brother's face must have finally pushed him over the edge. I thought about grabbing the 1911, but I didn't fully know how to use it. The shotgun, on the other hand, that was in the now open gun cabinet, I was more intimate with. Dad taught me how to shoot it, always bruised my shoulder, but he said it was one of the best options for home defense. I loaded in 3 shells of buckshot into the tube, followed by 2 slugs and 1 in the chamber. I grabbed a handful of shells and put them in the front pocket of my flannel shirt I was wearing. I slowly opened the door that led out into the hallway, past my parents' room, past the kitchen. I saw my mom still on the ground, crying into the tiles still. "Mom," I whispered, "you need to run." She didn't respond. She just stood up and brushed herself off. "Oh, hi." "Riley, I was about to make pancakes for your brother. Can you tell him to wash up?" She smiled, her eyes blank with emotion. "Fuck," I said to myself. I hurried up the stairs, pushed the brother's shotgun against my shoulder, ready for the thing to pounce at the top of the stairs. It never came. I checked my room. The door had been broken down, but there was no sign of the thing. I checked my brother's room as well, just in case this thing had the courtesy of closing the door behind it. Nothing there either, just my brother's unmade bed, the way my mother had last left it. It was then I heard the TV downstairs turn on at an exceedingly high volume. I quickly turned around and headed back downstairs, past the kitchen, where I saw my mom still standing in the exact same spot, exactly with a whisk in her hand, stirring at air. I walked into the living room and saw the thing sitting on the couch watching cartoons. I raised the shotgun toward the back of what you'd call its head, readied my finger on the trigger. "Is it time for cartoons?" It said, almost perfectly imitating Max's voice. I hesitated for a moment. Its head spun around like an owl's, and it looked at me with its blackened eyes. It reminded me of a deer's eyes after you've killed it. It startled me and made my blood run cold. It was the first time seeing it up close. I was startled by its expression and fired the shotgun, clipping the top of its head with the slug. It shrieked at me as it jumped from the couch onto the ceiling and began crawling around like a spider. Its limbs gnarled like the branches of a tree, and its body twisted like a rag being wrung out. I aimed up at it as it began crawling over my head. This time I hit its center mass. Its body fell on top of me, pinning me to the ground. The shotgun was knocked out of my hands. Out of reach, a black, sap-like fluid oozed out of its mouth and chest wound. It stank like that of rotting food and putrid water. The thing was heavy, like a tree had fallen on me. I pushed and crawled my way out from under it. I was almost out before it grabbed my ankle. Large, brambled fingers began splitting out from its hands, wrapping around my leg. I could see the top of its head where I had shot it earlier. It pulsated like an organ that had grain running through it similar to wood. It looked up at me as its face began to split open, revealing rows of bony teeth running down its vertical maw. I turned to see the shotgun behind me. I lay back to try and reach it, but could barely touch it. The creature's maw began to get wider as the tendrils wrapped up to my thigh, just below my shorts. I took a deep breath and pulled back further, throwing myself further back. My skin was ripping and peeling at my thigh where the creature grasped me. I grabbed the shotgun and pulled it towards me. I pumped the next shell into the chamber. spitting the empty one across the carpet. I raised it towards the face of this creature, and as I did, a flash of memories of Max hit me. I couldn't tell if these were my memories or the creatures doing an attempt to catch me off guard. I didn't stop, I didn't blink, I pulled the trigger. The buckshot hit its exposed face point blank as it recoiled in pain, howling with a deafening scream. I pumped the next shell, ready to finish it off. It uncoiled its tendrils from my leg and crashed through the large living room window, escaping. A few moments later, I could hear sirens coming up our street. There was no explanation for the events that happened that day. The cops wouldn't have believed my story anyway. They chalked it up to being teenage hysteria due to a combination of my brother's death and my father's suicide. My mom never recovered and ended up in a home. I was supposed to graduate that year and start college the next. Instead, I got evaluated. They said I had PTSD and depression, and that I was probably bipolar too. Said I was a potential danger to myself. Even so, I never told anyone what really happened. I didn't want to end up like where my mom was. I still visit her from time to time. She recognizes me, but always says the same thing. Tell your brother to go wash up for breakfast. So why am I here? Back at this house? This decrepit memory? A part of me hopes that it is here, but the other reason is because when the cops were coming back then, I had the shotgun and a loose floorboard I had known about. I could get any firearm I needed for what I was about to do, but this one I have a personal history with. I don't know what that thing was that killed my brother and took his form. Years of research led me to various shapeshifters, skinwalkers, and legends like that. I do know that it came from the forest near Sleepy Falls, and that town always bothered me. I knew it was time to go back. Story 4. We went to film a haunted chapel for YouTube. Now we can't leave. Ever since I was a kid, horror stories had a strange grip on me. While other children clung to their blankets during thunderstorms or flinched at the creaking of old furniture, I leaned into it. I welcomed fear like an old friend. There was something about the unknown, the way a good horror tale wrapped around your spine and whispered cold truths into your bones that made me feel more alive than anything else. Over the years, I discovered I wasn't alone. I met Caleb, Rose, and Matthew in junior high school. It started with a horror book in my hand, Stephen King's Pet Sematary, and ended with hours-long debates about the scariest movies, creepiest urban legends, and whether or not exorcisms actually worked. By the time we hit senior high school, we were inseparable. Same classes, same part-time jobs, same strange obsession with fear. It wasn't just a friendship. It was a shared bloodline of adrenaline junkies who found comfort in screams. After graduating, we all got accepted to the same university. We moved in together, shared bills, and kept chasing the strange and supernatural. It felt only natural to start a YouTube channel. We called it Dead Hours. The premise was simple. Explore allegedly haunted or cursed places, record what we experienced overnight, and post the raw footage. No fake jump scares. No cheesy pranks. Just the truth. Whatever that truth turned out to be, our honesty stood out. It started small, but soon we had thousands of subscribers, then hundreds of thousands, then 1 million. Fans trusted us because we didn't act. We documented. With popularity came tips. People emailed us coordinates, obscure legends, and cursed locations across the country. Most of them turned out to be hoaxes or long-abandoned places with nothing but wind and raccoons. Then came Angel's Chapel. No name in the subject line. Just GPS coordinates and a 3-word message. Angel's Chapel. Cape. It didn't sound any more ominous than usual. We'd heard creepier. Still, we ran it by our followers during a live stream. What do you think? Worth checking out. Within minutes, the comments exploded. Don't go there. My uncle disappeared near Cape. It's not haunted. It's cursed. They say people still live inside, but they aren't people anymore. One comment stood out. Whatever you do, don't face a chapel when you enter. Walk in backward. It's the only way to see them. We laughed it off. It wouldn't be the first time the internet tried to scare us off. And usually when people say don't go, it means you'll get views. We packed up that weekend 3 cameras, infrared night vision, full battery packs, mics, backup lighting, food, and camping gear, and hit the road in Caleb's battered silver minivan. He drove. I mapped. Rose edited clips in the back seat, while Matthew cleaned lenses. The deeper we drove, the stranger things became. Houses thinned out, then disappeared. The tarred roads crumbled into dirt and dust. The trees grew thicker, taller. The sunlight struggled to pierce through the leaves. By the time we reached the end of the Mark Trail, the GPS had stopped working. The signal was dead. The only sound was gravel crunching beneath the tires. Then, at the end of a narrow clearing, we saw it. The chapel. It looked Victorian, but wrong. Tilted forward, as if it had been trying to bow for decades and never stopped. The paint had long peeled away, leaving behind splinters and mold. Vines clawed across its exterior like veins. The front doors were crooked and hung open just enough to see pitch darkness within. And above it all, an upside-down iron cross hung limp from the peak, swaying ever so slightly, though there was no breeze. 2 skeletal trees flanked the building like ancient guards. Their bark was scorched black, and their twisted limbs pointed downward, almost touching the chapel's roof like they wanted to squeeze the building out of existence. The pressure in the air hit us immediately. It wasn't just silence. It was like the world was watching. Rose took a small step forward, then froze. It's like the place is holding its breath, she whispered. We laughed, but it was nervous laughter. Caleb raised his camera and began filming. Let's go. Golden hour's almost over. Just before we stepped in, Rose hesitated. Let's do it, she said, backwards for the fans. No one argued. It had become a superstition of sorts respect to legends, just in case. So we turned around, took a deep breath, and walked backward into Angel's Chapel. And that's when we saw them. It was instant, like crossing a threshold into another dimension. Figures lined the interior. Dozens. Some stood, repeatedly banging their heads into the wooden walls. Thud, thud, thud. Others crouched in corners, clawing symbols into the floorboard with broken, bleeding fingernails. Some wept like mourning mothers. Others laughed like they'd forgotten how to cry. Their eyes were wide, empty. Their mouths muttered words we'd never heard before. Not English. Not any language I've ever studied. Their skin was the color of ash. Some were covered in dirt. Others were barefoot. One of them was missing a jaw. The smell hit us next. Rotting meat, mold, and something worse. Burnt flesh, perhaps. It turned my stomach. Rose gasped and turned, bolting outside. Her footsteps echoed sharply against the wooden floor. We ran after her. Rose collapsed near one of the dead trees, falling to her knees and vomiting into the grass. I dropped beside her, rubbing her back as she coughed. Her whole body shook. What was that? I asked, my voice barely audible. Caleb looked pale. Those people, they weren't right. That wasn't just mental illness. That was something else. Matthew turned in slow circles, scanning the woods. Has no one ever found this place before? Has no one reported it? We should call the police, Rose said, wiping her mouth. We all pulled out our phones. No bars. Dead screens. Not even emergency signals. Panic started creeping in. We need to leave, Matthew said, his voice sharp with urgency. And then we heard them. Screams. Not just one. Dozens. Maybe more. Screams of agony. Of people being hurt? No. Tortured. It echoed from inside the chapel like 100 souls crying out at once, clawing at their throats, begging for help. Without thinking, we ran. Toward it. Toward the sound. Forgetting the warning. Forgetting everything. We burst through the chapel doors. This time, forward. And everything was empty. The figures were gone. The screams had stopped. But the horror hadn't. The chapel was now red. Not painted. Marked. Symbols, strange and looping, covered every inch of the wooden walls and floorboards. Some were smeared, some carved, some looked like they'd been scratched in with fingernails. All of it was written in what looked like blood. Maybe it wasn't, but it smelled like it. Thick, rusty, warm. The air was suffocating. Every breath tasted like iron. "We need to go," Rose whispered. We didn't argue. We backed out this time, actually backing out, and ran to the van. Caleb jumped in and turned the key. Nothing. Come on, he muttered, trying again. Silence. He slammed the wheel. Don't do this now. Matthew tried. Then me. Then Rose. The engine wouldn't even click. No lights. No sounds. No life. Just us. And that damn chapel watching us. "We can't stay here," Rose said, her voice shaking. "Not another minute." "Then we walk," Caleb said. "Grab what you can carry. Leave the rest." No one argued. We grabbed our bags. Water, flashlights, knives. And we walked praying we wouldn't see the chapel again. For the first 30 minutes. It was quiet. Then we saw it. The twisted rock formation we passed earlier. The claw-shaped one. We paused. Maybe there was more than one. Maybe we were just shaken. But then came the fallen tree with the broken branch, the one Caleb almost tripped over when we arrived. Then the chapel, standing exactly where it had been. Crooked, waiting. "No," Matthew said, stepping back. "No, we went straight. We never turned. We didn't. We're in a loop?" I whispered. The four of us stood frozen in the trees. Flashlights flickering. No one moved. Caleb's jaw clenched. Rose rubbed her arms like she was trying to keep something out. The silence got tight. Then Matthew, eyes fixed ahead, muttered just loud enough to break it. So either the devil's got us in a chokehold, or we just really suck at hiking. He forced a laugh. It came out wrong. Too dry, like his throat couldn't keep up. No one else laughed. "Okay, tough crowd." He looked down, and I saw the way his hand gripped the flashlight. Too tight, fingers pale from the pressure. Night fell fast, like someone had dropped a blackout curtain on the sky. No stars, no moon, just dark. Cold crept in from every direction. It wasn't normal cold. It felt hollow, like the cold was coming from the inside. We didn't go back inside the chapel. We camped in the van, doors locked, bags against the windows. Then came the screams again. Louder, closer. They didn't echo this time. They vibrated like the chapel was humming with pain. Then came the voices. Not ours. Outside. Whispering. Then laughing. A child's laugh. "This isn't real," Caleb said, pacing inside the van. "This is some trick. This is a stress. This is... Did you see her?" Rose whispered. "Who?" I asked. "The girl," she said. She was standing outside, in a white dress. She was smiling, but her mouth wasn't moving right. I don't remember falling asleep. Maybe I didn't. Maybe I blacked out. Maybe something took me. But when I opened my eyes, I wasn't in the van anymore. I was sitting on a narrow wooden bench, barely wide enough to hold me. The space around me was cramped, close, suffocating. Walls boxed me in on both sides. The only light came from a thin, carved window covered in a rust-colored mesh. My breath echoed louder than it should have. The air smelled like old incense and iron. And then I realized this was a confessional. The wood creaked beneath me as I shifted. My heartbeat was louder than my thoughts. I ran my hand along the wall beside me. Splinters jabbed at my fingertips. On the opposite side of the screen, I saw only darkness. No priest. No figure. Just absence. Then I heard it. Whispers. Slow. Sticky. It didn't sound like a person. It sounded like breath trying to form language. I froze. "Caleb?" I whispered. Nothing. Then, faintly from beyond the wood, "Can you see them?" It was Rose's voice. But it was wrong. Flat. Empty. Like she was underwater. Then Matthew's voice. I never told anyone. But now it's too late. I pressed my palms against the door and shoved hard. It didn't move. The booth was sealed shut. "Hello? Caleb?" Rose. My voice cracked. Somebody help me. Their voices kept repeating, over and over. Forgive me. Do you remember what you did? You brought us here. No. I shouted. No, I didn't. And then silence. Total. Until the screen began to glow. Dimly at first. A dull red pulsing from behind the mesh. Like the booth itself was bleeding light. And then it spoke. A voice not meant for human ears. Low. Deep. Grinding like stone dragged across metal. It didn't come from the other side of the screen. It came from inside me. You have sinned. My hands trembled. I don't understand. Confess and be forgiven. Refuse and burn. I couldn't breathe. The air thickened. My chest tightened like invisible hands were crushing it. The corners of the booth seemed to stretch and twist like the walls were breathing with me. I closed my eyes, but it was worse in the dark. Behind my eyelids, I saw faces. Dozens of them. Their mouths stitched shut, eyes wide open, watching me, judging. You have the wrong person. I choked out. I didn't do anything. Silence. Then the sound of tearing fabric. Wet. Clothes. You lied. The light inside the booth turned blood red. I looked down and realized my fingernails were bleeding, one by one, like they were being pulled out slowly. I screamed and slammed my fist into the wall. Stop it, please. Then the voice said, confess what you buried. And it came back. A memory I didn't even realize I'd buried, so deep it felt like fiction. I was 11. My cousin. The pool. The screaming. I'd told everyone she slipped, but she didn't. I pushed her. I didn't mean to. We were fighting. I was angry. I didn't know she couldn't swim. The guilt I spent years pretending didn't exist clawed its way back through my chest. Tears welled in my eyes. I bowed my head, trembling, broken. Father, I whispered, I have sinned. Repeat. And I did. The words weren't mine anymore. They came in a language I didn't know, yet my mouth obeyed. It felt like my body was no longer mine. My lips moved. My eyes burned. My head throbbed. I wasn't speaking. I was surrendering. Each word pulled something out of me. Not physically, but spiritually. Like layers of me were peeling away. And when it was over, silence. Total and suffocating. Then the voice returned soft this time. Like a lullaby made of teeth. You are forgiven. Pause. But you must stay. You must atone. I screamed. I threw myself against the walls again and again. I couldn't stay. I wouldn't. Not until they gave way. And I fell through, right back into the chapel. Same floorboards. Same cold. Same scent of rotting wood and blood. And something older. I was alone. The chapel was full again, but not with my friends. They were back. The figures. Their heads turned toward me this time. They were watching, waiting, muttering. One took a step forward. Another crawled. They formed a circle around me, not touching, but close. Close enough for me to feel their breath. Close enough for me to see their eyes, milky and empty like dried out wells. I turned and ran for the doors. Something stopped me. Not a wall. Not a force. Just space refusing to let me leave. Like the room was no longer part of Earth. I remember the voice. You must stay. And I knew then, this place doesn't kill you. It keeps you. It studies you. It forces you to face what you swore no one would ever know. It forgives you, but only after it breaks you. I don't know how long I've been here. Minutes? Days? Years? I don't even remember the sound of Caleb's laugh, or Rose's stubborn jokes, or Matthew's camera clicks. I don't know if they escaped, or if they're still here, like me, watching, whispering, waiting. Story 5. The Missing Parking Lot, Part 1. A friend and I started a YouTube channel over a year ago that is on an indefinite hiatus due to something we stumbled into and now find ourselves involved in. We both enjoyed watching videos of urban exploration, urbex as it's known in short, being the first in perhaps decades to walk inside a long-forgotten hidden space was exciting to us. With a newfound excuse to hang out, Andy and I kept busy and did some research over equipment, what to be prepared for, and places of interest in our area, buying the best gear we could find within our budget. We were off recording making our own videos soon after. We went to various locations that piqued our interest, including a closed-off parking garage, abandoned overgrown house, and an old run-down apartment complex, to name a few. Looking back, it was this complex that made us start to see urban exploring as more than a hobby. The complex was 3 stories high and very run-down. It felt and looked like we were in a horror movie as we recorded. Locations were getting a little repetitive for us at the time, and this was the change of scenery we had been looking for. Unfortunately, owners had just installed cameras near the entrance we had failed to notice. We were kicked out 20 minutes in by police. Cops asked us for our IDs and addressed us with our formal names Andres and Pedro, which Andy particularly disliked. We told them we were photographers, and they seemed fine about us snooping around, but said the place was falling apart and would soon be demolished and fenced. We were asked to leave for our own safety. The video of us at the complex and getting caught by police got us some actual views and subscribers. Even though it was our shortest upload yet, suddenly hooked and in need of help, we hit up Dario, a mutual friend, to operate another camera and give our videos more perspectives. No longer were we after simple, dilapidated places. We were now in search of places that we were most likely not allowed to be in. Unique locations that might be unsafe, that could get us fined, and, or worse, all to keep our viewers invested. An old church rumored to be haunted was next. Members of a skate park blocks away from the forgotten place of worship mentioned how they had often seen a ghostly figure there, and very recently, lying or not. Thanks to them, we got a good setup for the video with footage of eyewitness accounts, and proceeded to go check the place out. This ghost turned out to be nothing more than a homeless man wearing an oversized sweatshirt. Even then, the footage we recorded wasn't any less terrifying. The bum had chased us out and broken through the rotted floor, falling full story through on the basement floor below. We assumed he was seriously hurt. Looking down to the ruptured wooden flooring, Andy focuses light on the man's face, who was seemingly unconscious, suddenly covering his sight with one hand and clearly drunk. The man got up and started yelling obscenities, all while vigorously giving us the finger with both hands. Glad he was unhurt, we chuckled, told him sorry, and that we would leave a flashlight behind for him. We left it by the door along with some cash, and the man again yelled for us to get out. We ran back to the car before he finished walking up the basement steps. This upload was eventually our most lucrative in the video that put us on the YouTube algorithm with many viewers watching weeks after upload. The top comment mentioned how, considering it was a church, the man had landed in a very fitting position with his arms spread either side and legs close together. This made us laugh. In spite of this video's success, most of our audience accused it of being staged. This frustrated the 3 of us, but we decided to run with it, whichever way it was perceived. They still tuned in. Our last stop to date, and the origin of our current dilemma, started at an abandoned junkyard. Trying to break the routine with the goal to go on a hike right after. It was located over an hour away from us, surrounded by forest. There were a few houses on the way, but the place was in the middle of nowhere. The closest gas station was 20 minutes out. On our way, early, we got there before noon. With our gloves on, we climbed into the old front gate that had fallen inwards and was leaning on a few cars. Once inside, we made our way toward a small house in the premises that we could maybe check out. Taking good footage of the few cars we recognized, and some that had been almost completely swallowed by foliage. Checking the place out, we suddenly heard a car coming and hid behind a few cars, looking out and recording towards a fence. The 3 of us then saw a white truck blasting country music parked near the fallen gate. Out walked a heavy-set man. After he stepped out, we saw his dog jump off. It looked to be a bully breed of some sort. The dog started barking the minute it stepped out of the truck. "What is it, boy?" the man asked the dog. He took a quick look at his surroundings before reaching his truck and pulling out a rifle. The dog clearly had our scent, and we needed to get out soon. The man whistled as he walked around the fence. Hearing the rattle of keys, we started to quietly walk back the way we came. The screech of a gate being open as the dog continued barking was what made us take off running. "Hey!" The man yelled when he saw us. I looked back and saw a cloud of dirt form as his dog came running after us. Panicking, we each took off in separate directions. Dario jumped over the fence from the rooftop of an old truck and hurt his ankle on the landing. I climbed over the fence so fast a nail caught on my palm under my thumb and cut my hand open, landing on some grass outside the fence. I held my hand tightly to stop the bleeding. Andy tore his jeans open when he climbed up 2 stacked cars. The dog then jumped and bit his jean threads. Trying to pull him down, Andy's pants luckily ripped further until the dog managed to rip the whole back off on his jean legs, revealing his boxers. Andy continued climbing with his shredded jeans and jumped and ran over a section of the fence that had just about fallen over, leaning similarly to the gate we had entered through. When he made it out, he yelled at the man that we weren't stealing and meant no harm, that we were just photographers. He held out his camera as he caught his breath. "I don't care who you are. I just bought this property and don't want to see you creeping around here," the man said after laughing loudly. He then called his barking dog a good boy and continued laughing. "Y'all better take off now, for I called the police," he yelled, pointing at us with his rifle in one hand before walking out of view into the small house. I got up as Andy walked towards us, shaking his head and cursing. He was still breathing heavily, with what was left of his pants swaying in the wind. We both saw that Dario had still been recording. "I recorded the whole thing, boys," he said to the pain as Andy helped him up and walked him over to our car. Taking out the first aid kit, we patched up my hand best we could. Needless to say, we called off our hike and headed to the nearest hospital. Unfortunately, that meant driving further into the town, as I was bleeding quite a bit. I was treated quickly and didn't need any stitches, just surgical sutures and a tetanus shot. It took Dario much longer to get treated and x-rayed. While he was in a lot of pain, it was just a badly sprained ankle. Andy had another pair of pants that he changed into. Our past ventures had taught us to bring extra sets of clothes just in case. During the time we got treated, he scouted out the area and got us some decent food to eat. When Andy came back to the hospital with the food, the TV in the lobby was tuned to the local news, mentioning the identities of some teenagers who had last been seen a week earlier. Search efforts were taking place nearby, with many volunteers and family of the victims asking for help. Waiting in line to be asked who he was visiting to be let in, he overheard some folks talk about lesser-known disappearances from many years back, majority of which still remain unsolved. How people used to refer to town as a small disappearance hotspot until the major improvements in infrastructure and arrival of GPS helped with traversal. Avoid evening and late-night travel is what people used to tell me, an older gentleman said. Both on foot and by car, a lady added. Considering the cars of most local victims also vanished, I would agree. Another lady replied, "I was always told growing up to behave, or whatever was in the woods would come get me. I'm still a little scared to this day." Another man said. Some laughed at his remark, as he was quite obviously the oldest one in the conversation. Theories were thrown out, and many attributed the disappearances to an arrested serial killer that frequented a nearby area. Evidence was never found to suggest this, but many believed it to be true. It was at this point Andy got the idea to come back for our next video. He wouldn't need to convince us. We would have plenty of reason to return. Conversation was still ongoing when Andy was eventually allowed up to Dario's room, where he and I waited for the food. By the time we ate and were out of the hospital, it was past 3 p.m. Back in the car, we finally went over footage of the 3 cameras. Dario had done well in recording. His footage was the one that clearly showed what we had just gone through. The way Andy's pants ripped and how he almost got pulled down by the dog reminded me of a Charlie Chaplin film. Dario and I barely managed to keep a straight face and not laugh. Andy cursed at the dog as he watched it bite his pants. Quickly brainstorming ideas for the upload, we planned to show pictures of both my healing cut and Dario's swollen ankle in the video. Taking a long break was unavoidable, but at least it was harder to claim it as fake. With our injuries treated and feeling better, we decided to check the area out further before heading home. Andy had seen places that might work for future videos. Intending to drive by an old warehouse, he took a wrong turn, and we ended up at a beautiful forested suburban area taking in the scenic sights and recording while driving through. This makes up for our lost hike, Dario said as he took footage of our surroundings while in the car. Andy then began to tell us about the conversation he heard in the hospital and the news of the missing teens as he drove. Forced to turn around a few times after hitting some dead ends in the maze-like neighborhood. We were suddenly pulled over by an officer. Andy had his license and registration in hand before the officer walked up to our car. After running it through the database and not finding anything of note, he told us he had stopped us because a local resident had seen us driving back and forth and grown suspicious of us. Most homeowners in the area are wealthy, retired, and very wary of strangers. Many houses are vacation homes and empty for extended periods of time. Local properties make for perfect targets, he told us. Officer then proceeded to do some small talk, asking what we were up to and where we were headed. We told him we were photographers looking for a good spot. Conversation was going well until he saw my bandaged hand and asked me how I got hurt. I had to think for a second before I told him I simply fell hiking. He read my bluff and asked me to step out of the car. Things escalated quickly, and before I knew it, I was in handcuffs. Andy and Dario tried asking the officer why I was arrested while I was in his cruiser. The ranger just told them they were both also suspects and called for backup. Due to limited resources in the rural area, they were to be escorted in their car to the ranger station 30 minutes away while I rode in the back of the cruiser. I was taken to the ranger station and put in an interrogation room. I waited there for an hour before an officer came in and asked me where I was 2 nights before. I was at work away from this stupid town. I told him before asking for a lawyer. The officer then said a lawyer was on the way for me before walking out. 15 minutes later, my lawyer walked in, told me to call him Frank, and proceeded to tell me the details and what I, along with my friends, was believed to be involved in. One of the recent break-ins had apparently happened 2 nights before we showed up. The suspect had left a blood trail that started by the broken window of the house. It looked like the culprit had most likely cut themselves on exiting the premises and ran into the forest with the stolen goods. I told Frank that my injury had happened that morning and that I could get doctor's notes and proof of hospital visits from just a few hours earlier. He wrote that down on a notepad. Is there anything else you can tell me, Pedro? The police report states that you and your friends are photographers. Are there any pictures, any proof that might show where you and your friends were recently? He asked. I thought to myself for a bit. I didn't realize I was spacing out until he started talking again. If nothing comes to mind, I'm afraid we will have to perform and wait for blood samples to come through to see if you are indeed a match. That could take anywhere from 2 days to a week. Keep in mind you will probably have to wait in town. I'll do my best to stop them from keeping you in a holding cell. I know you and your friends are ways out from home. Do your best to clear your mind and think of something. Okay, Pedro, he asked. No way I'm staying in this town for another day, I thought to myself before telling my lawyer the truth. I told Frank that we weren't just photographers. I told him we were urban explorers that had snuck into a local junkyard, and that's how I had gotten hurt. Look, Pedro, this doesn't help your case in any way. Was it private property? He asked. Yes. I cut myself jumping over the fence, I answered. So you're telling me you didn't break into the house you're being framed for, but you broke into a nearby junkyard? He then asked. Yeah, I answered, realizing I sounded more guilty now than before. I'm assuming your friends have proof you were there this morning? He asked, taking notes. Yes. We actually have a few recordings, even one that shows how everything happened. I said, okay, I will get with them. I'll take a look at that recording and see if that helps your case. You hang tight, I'll be back in a bit. Frank then walked out while I waited and eventually fell asleep. I woke up to an officer shaking my shoulder and telling me I was free to wait out in the lobby. I could tell he was holding in a laugh. My friends were happy to see me out and said that they had been waiting for 2 hours while my case was being processed. Both had also received a pat down, and officers had inventory searched all our backpacks. When asked about the recordings, they had tried to play dumb, but Frank said he knew about them, and they were likely the fastest way my charges could be dropped. Once the videos were analyzed in a private office room, They could hear how it made my lawyer, as well as a few officers, laugh and completely change their demeanor. Both my lawyer as well as the station had made copies of the recordings for future reference in the case. I'm sure they all would have had a blast if they were ever able to show the video to friends and family. As we caught up, Frank walked out of a room along with an officer and said that thanks to our recordings, my charges for breaking and entering/theft were being dropped. They were just to perform a police search on our vehicle and a welfare check on our friend, the junkyard owner. The car inspection took less than 20 minutes. It was a checkup on the junkyard that took longer as the owner was not there. Cops performed a full survey of the premises, concluded everything was in order, and reported back to the station. Frank again spoke to us and said we were no longer suspecting the case, but I was likely still in hot water for lying to an officer and trespassing if the junkyard owner decides to file a report. We waited in the station for another hour before we were finally told we could leave and handed back our car keys. Officers didn't even try to hide it. They had gotten a kick out of Dario's recording and said that it had made their week. I'm assuming it was the reason all our charges were dropped so soon. The only thing was we could not upload or do anything with the footage until further notice. Following Frank out, we thanked him. He gave us his card to keep in touch if anything else came in proceedings. As we spoke, outside a few officers ran out of the station. Each took off in separate cruisers. I wonder what's going on, Andy asked. Frank then mentioned the teenagers that had gone missing a week before, and that maybe something had come up in the search that was currently being held. Frank then said he had to go, shook our hands, and wished us good luck. He walked away, giving Andy a pat on the back, and smirked, telling him to bring proper equipment next time he goes climbing. Take care now, you boys drive safe. He said, getting in his car and driving off. God, I'm never going to hear the end of it once we upload that video. I don't even want to upload it anymore. Andy said as we saw Frank drive off, oh, we're uploading it no matter what. You getting your pants ripped by that dog was the best thing that happened to us today. I replied, not a chance, I'm letting my footage go to waste. Dario added, shut up, Andy said. Walking to our car, Dario waddled his way, following us on his crutches. Finally back in our car, it was just about 8 p.m. when we started our drive back home. The night had an eerie vibe with fog beginning to form. I took some pain medication to stop my hand from pulsating and hurting. The three of us were hungry and tired at this point, and just wanted to have a relaxing, normal drive. It was going to take about 3 hours to get back home thanks to the detours we had endured. Both Dario and I would have to call off from work the next day, debating over getting a hotel or driving back home. Ultimately, we decided on driving back home due to our injuries and unpleasant experiences in town. Andy was okay with driving the full 3 hours, as he was off the next day, and said he had taken a decent nap while in the station. He, of course, didn't have much of a choice. Dario and I were still injured. I was starting to doze off when we came to a full stop, and I opened my eyes to the blinking lights of 2 police cruisers. They were parked blocking the road in front of us. What now? Dario asked from the back seat. You guys see that? Andy asked as he looked out his window to our left. Out in the distance, we could see some parked cars and flashlights flickering and bouncing through the trees. We had run into the search party for the missing teens. Still looking to our left, we were suddenly startled by the tapping of my passenger seat window. It was one of the officers that had run out of the station as we spoke to Frank outside earlier. I then rolled my window down. Sorry, gentlemen, this road is blocked. You're going to have to go back the way you came and take a detour, he said, leaning on our car. You all have a physical map handy? He then asked. Yeah, I think so, Andy said, pointing for me to pull out of the glove compartment. The officer asked us where we were headed, then wrote and drew on the map. He told us phone reception was usually very bad in the area and gave us directions for an old logging route to take. It was a dirt road primarily used for hiking during the day. A few officers knew of it and used it from time to time. The road ended on an uphill hard right turn that would be harder to see at night. If we stayed at or below the speed limit, we'd be fine. We were skeptical, but based on where we were headed, the officer calculated it would save us 20 minutes. The alternative was driving more than half an hour back around the town. Normally, there'd be no reason to take that road at night, but he recognized our predicament and would allow it. Before turning the car around, Andy asked the officer if the flashlights in the distance were the search party. Officer confirmed it was them, and that the roadblock was ongoing because of evidence they found. Said some volunteers decided to continue the search later than usual, hoping something else would turn up in the area. After thanking the officer, we drove off toward the shortcut, eventually driving by a forensic van. Our suspicion that the search party had likely found a body being all but confirmed. We were obligated to turn on our high beams at this point, as the fog was getting much worse. I opened maps on my phone for another perspective, and just like the officer had said, there was no record of such a road. It was only when I switched to satellite view that I was able to see it. Following the officer's directions as well as my phone, we slowed down after driving by a closed campground entrance and kept an eye out. Sure enough, the small road suddenly came up on our left. Is that enough signs or what? I said as we stopped and looked at the entrance. There were 4 signs posted: a drive with your lights on, a very old logging ground sign, a fog area sign, and a subject to flooding sign. We have our high beams on. We already knew it was a logging ground road. We can clearly see the fog, and the area is completely dry. Andy said, pointing at each sign he referenced as he spoke. We'll be fine. This baby's four-wheel drive. He added, tapping the dashboard. Dario and I agreed, and we drove inside the unknown road, presuming everything would be okay. We entered the dirt road, and the darkness around us increased drastically, giving the illusion that the forest was closing in, slowly swallowing us. The dirt and dust combined with the fog was severely affecting our visibility. All 3 of us were fully concentrated on the drive, looking straight ahead. I can't see anything. I feel like I'm driving recklessly, and I'm not even hitting 20 miles per hour. Andy said loudly. The crunching of the dirt and bouncing and rattling of the car seemed to get worse all of a sudden. Holy shit, this is making my ankle hurt, Dario said from the middle of the back seat. He was holding on to both front headrests to keep himself more steady. We were all still focused on the drive, looking forward, when in an instant a large black mass moved in front of us from the right. Watch out! I yelled as it first came into view from my passenger window. Andy hit the brakes and simultaneously honked. The car came to a full stop in just enough time to avoid collision. We looked at whatever was in front of us intently. What the hell is that? Andy asked in a frightened tone. Whatever it was, it moved slightly, revealing its horns, and we realized we were looking at the rear end of an elk. That's a big boy, Andy said, still holding his chest in the scare. Yo, Pedro, let's try to get good pics of it, Dario said, handing me my camera. I struggled to turn on the camera, but snapped a couple shots of the animal. We aren't going to get very good shots of the animal with all this fog. Plus, I can't really operate my camera well with my bandage hand, I said, while still taking pics. Yeah, I'm mostly getting its ass. I can barely see its horns and head, Dario said, while also getting shots. Just get out and take some better pictures of it, you guys, Andy said jokingly. Oh, hell no, I'm not going out there, I answered. Are you crazy? I can't even stand? Dario asked mid-laugh. Andy also laughed and again honked at the animal. It was seemingly startled by the horn, except it didn't budge. It just stayed there looking on, frozen in shock, with its back still towards us and facing forward. It turned its head to look behind itself, and we saw its eyes catch the light of our high beams. Come on, big guy, buzz off, get off the road, Andy said loudly as he switched the car headlights on and off a few times to see if it would finally make the elk move. It seemed to work as the animal continued down the road for a few feet, and then made a left turn into the forest, out of range of our headlights. Just like it came into view, it was gone in an instant. We inched forward, moving even slower than before. Dario joked they should add a wildlife crossing sign, the road entrance, and we laughed. None of us said a word for a few minutes. I could sense a bit of tension forming between us, like we were all understandably anticipating something else to happen. It had been a rough day, and we were all understandably on edge. Laughing at our predicaments gave me relief and helped us tremendously. The 3 of us just wanted to get back to an area we recognized, sick of being on the road in an unfamiliar place far away from home. For a second I lamented taking the shady road after everything that had happened to us, but I recognized we were desperate to get out of this town and save time. Looking for my phone that had flown out of my hands when we hit the brakes, I found it stuck between my seat and the right side of the car. After I managed to yank it out, I tried to access maps and quickly realized I had no service of any kind. I asked Andy and Dario to check their phones, and they also had no service. My anxiety only grew as I unfolded the paper map, and we continued onwards. The Missing Parking Lot, Part 2. My anxiety only grew as I unfolded the paper map, and we continued onwards, turning on one of the car's dome lights. I studied the map carefully as if reading some ancient manuscript. Directions were simple. According to what the officer had drawn, we were just to pass 2 sections where the dirt road splits into hiking trails and continue on until we reached the blind turn on our right, which would be our exit. Okay, there's the first road split, Andy said as we drove by it on our right. Nice. We're halfway there, I said as I looked forward and caught a glimpse of a small trail. The fog was still present, but the road had gotten better, and we were actually making faster progress now. I randomly looked toward the back seat and saw Dario had a confused expression on his face. What's up? I asked him. The pictures I took of the elk are gone, man. He then said. What? I asked, pulling out my camera and checking. What the hell? The pictures I took of it are also gone. I said loudly. What is going on? This is freaking me out, bro, Dario said, visibly perplexed with his hand on his forehead. You guys sure you didn't accidentally delete them or move them somewhere somehow, like a hidden folder? Andy asked. Nope. Besides the odds of both of us accidentally doing that at the same time is impossible, I answered. This has never happened before, Dario added. Check your storage space, I then told him. I'm good. I've got plenty of space and my SD card seems to be working fine, he said. No way, both our cameras glitch, man. That's unusual, I said, completely confused. Dario and I did everything we could think of to find the pictures we had just taken. We checked all folders, reinserted SD cards as well as batteries, and did both a soft and factory reset on the 2 cameras to no avail. Most recent pictures we had were the ones Dario took of the forested neighborhood before I got arrested, with no cloud backup of any kind. The next best thing to do was to use some kind of photo recovery software once we got home. What a day, Dario said from the back seat, rubbing his face in frustration. He was understandably upset over everything that was going wrong. We continued down the road, soon driving by the second hike trail, this time on our left just like the officer had drawn. Now over 3/4 of the way through the road, we estimated. Crazy how the trees and night sky are blended together. It's so dark you can't tell where each one starts anymore. Andy mentioned as he drove, this is not a road I would take if I was riding alone. Not even during the day. I quickly added, definitely not, Andy reiterated. There's 3 of us, more safety in numbers, but I still have a gut feeling. Dario and I agreed we also felt unsafe. We have both pepper spray and bear spray, I said, half joking. Remind me to bring my dad's pistol next time, Andy said, straight-faced. The dark road was now becoming all too familiar, while moving. At the same time, I felt we were staying in place. Perhaps because I knew we were very close to the exit. I half expected something else to jump out of the shadows of our headlights. We were relieved yet confused when we finally arrived at the end of the road, and were presented with not the aforementioned hard right turn, but a fork in the road. It wasn't forked down the middle, more like a split that came up on our right side with the current road ending at a road closure. We stopped and contemplated the paths ahead. Okay, so the officer said there was a tight right-hand turn at the end of this road. I'm guessing he forgot about the other path? Andy asked, referring to both us and himself. I don't know. Everything until this point matches exactly to what he wrote and told us. Him forgetting a major detail seems unlikely, I said, looking down at the map. Still got no service of any kind. Dario said from the back seat, looking down at his phone. Andy and I also checked our phones, and they were just as useless as they were earlier. We had no way of knowing which way to take. The 2 choices were either taking the first and tightest turn at around 45 degrees, or taking the other right-hand turn closer to 90 degrees. The logging road we had been taking ended on a curve, therefore both choices were viable. Either one could be the correct route. If the officer said our exit was a tight right turn, I'm assuming it's this way. Andy said, pointing the way on our furthest right. Dario and I agreed that the tightest turn matched the officer's description the most, so we made the turn and took off. The crunching of dirt and slight rattle of our vehicle started getting worse again as we picked up speed. God, when are we finally going to get back to the paved road? This is starting to make me sick, Dario complained. Only a few minutes in, this new road had now started declining, and he was having to hit the brakes to keep the car from picking up more speed. The fog and darkness were still as present as ever. Looking at what the officer drew on the map, this road was supposed to start curving slightly to the left and eventually merge onto the road we would use to get out of town. Instead, it continued onward, seemingly straight and downhill. There we go, Andy said abruptly. The road had gone from dirt to pavement, and the car immediately stopped shaking. Both him and Dario were relieved while I was still skeptical. I'm not sure we're going the right way, I told him, looking ahead at the passing yellow and white stripes of the paved road that was still descending. The way we're headed doesn't match what the officer drew. I think we are riding parallel with the correct path, and this road is leading us elsewhere. Maybe it's a different route. Either way, the officer was wrong. Andy said, confident we were headed out of town. The descent continued, but only for a few minutes, until the road finally leveled and the pavement marking ceased. What the... Andy said out loud as he slowed down. We moved slowly as, even through the fog, we could tell what was once the road opened wider and wider. Realizing it was a very wide open paved area, we assumed it to be some kind of rest stop or RV park. Moving forward, we soon started seeing very faded parking lines. Continuing on, we kept an eye out for any signs of life. So far, it appeared we were the only ones here. If this was a rest stop, why was there no noise whatsoever? No other cars passing by us. No headlights to be seen to the fog. This place is creepier than the road we came through, Dario replied from the back seat. Yep, we took the wrong road, I said, looking around nervously. What is this place? Andy asked when suddenly he hit the brakes and our car screeched. Something had come into view in front of us. Almost didn't see it through the fog, Andy said, inching closer. When we got closer, we saw that it was a very old abandoned car. It was rusted all over, and the tires were rotted out and flat. Only distinguishable feature of the car was its fading bright green paint. I don't think this place is a rest stop if that car was allowed to sit here and rot, Dario said, pulling out his camera. We drove around the old car and were caught off guard by more abandoned vehicles. They came into view, randomly parked in a deserted lot. Some of them were in decent shape and appeared functional. Weaving between them, Andy pointed out something bright in the distance that looked to be further away due to fog. Heading towards it, we saw it was just another abandoned car, catching the triangular glow of a light pole. We neared it and saw there were two more in the distance. The light poles were spaced at about the same length from each other. Unable to tell if there were any more thanks to the fog. What we could tell was that this place seemed to be huge. Seriously, what is this place? Andy asked again. Who keeps lights on for no one except all these forgotten cars? Why is this massive place paved? He continued driving, cutting in between the abandoned vehicles and fog. Hold on. Slow down here, Dario said from the back seat. He had been taking pictures for a while and was now holding the camera and pointing it at an odd-looking car. What type of car is that? I asked. Andy got close enough to see the emblem, and Dario captured a photo from the back seat. The car had a logo none of us recognized. Some of these cars are in perfect shape, just dirty and old. It's as if they were forgotten here and left to rot. Dario said, still taking pics. You're right. Assuming this is another junkyard. Most of these cars are nice and complete. I don't see many that are missing parts or that appear to have been wrecked in any kind of accident. Some just appear old and rusted. I replied, looking around. Most of the glass windows are closed and intact too. Why is this place so neat? All the junkyards I've ever been to are a mess. There's no way to tell what this place actually is. Andy said, thinking out loud. Are you kidding me? My camera is still not working. None of the pics I just took were saved. Dario yelled, holding his camera. Here, test mine, I said, handing him my camera. My hand had started hurting again. Nope. Also not working, Dario said, slouching in defeat in the back seat. I left my camera in the trunk. No way I'm going out there to get attacked by another junkyard dog. Let's just try our phones, Andy said, grabbing his phone after putting the car in park. Dario and I checked again and told Andy we still had no service. No, I mean let's try using our phone cameras and see if those work. Andy clarified. We each took a test shot with no luck. Just like the cameras, our phones were taking pictures and footage, but it all seemed to disappear when we checked our photos in galleries. Okay, so now we know it's not just our cameras. There's a bigger issue going on here in this specific area, including the logging road we came through. Andy said, you think there's some facility nearby that has access to signal jammers or something? Dario asked, intrigued. That would explain our phone signal loss, but that wouldn't explain our lost camera and phone feeds. I don't believe jammers affect SD cards. They don't work that way. I said, thinking of other possibilities. The fact is, the three of us are in an area we shouldn't be with no way of contacting anyone if something goes wrong. I added, if something else goes wrong, you mean, because we are already in rough shape as a group, Dario replied. Yeah, let's get out before we get disoriented in here, Andy said, putting the car on drive and heading back the way we came, driving in between the many abandoned cars and fog. We thought we lost our way until we saw the bright green paint of the first car that came into view earlier. Using it as a guide, we eventually found our way back out of that mysterious place, re-entering the road we came through. Uphill instead of downhill took us a little longer, but 15 minutes later, we made it back to the split in the road. After taking the other right-hand turn, just a few minutes later it merged onto the paved main road we recognized, exactly how the officer said it would. Our view was nice and open, no longer as restricted by the dark forest and fog. Ecstatic to see other cars on the road and have phone service again, we were back on track heading home. All of us were starving and stopped to refuel and eat at the first gas station we saw. I stretched out my legs as I ate a fully loaded gas station hot dog. Eating snacks in the car, we waited for Dario, who had gone to the restroom. Dario was struggling to get around. He was still not used to the crutches, but didn't want help. Whilst in the car, I accessed maps on my phone and checked satellite view. I was still curious about the massive place we had stumbled into and hoped the top view would clarify exactly what that place was. I traced the road on my phone. When I got a hard right turn, I saw that it only showed one right turn instead of two. No sign of the first road we took that lead into the massive parking lot. Check this out, I told Andy as I showed him how there was no such thing as two right turns according to my phone's GPS. Then what the hell did we stumble into, Pedro? He asked. That reminds me, he then said as he walked out of the car and opened the trunk to retrieve his camera. After a quick check, he said everything seemed to be in order. His camera still had the photos and footage of the junkyard from this morning, and it seemed to be taking pictures just fine. The glitches definitely had something to do with the area then, I said as Dario finally joined us inside the car. He and I tested out our cameras again, and they were back to normal, functioning the way they should, just like our phones. We were all absolutely perplexed over the road, not showing up in any of our phones' GPS. Exactly what was that place? Why do electronics go haywire? Why are all those cars there? These were just some of the questions we kept asking ourselves heading home. Nothing else of note happened that night. Andy dropped us home. I looked at the clock when I walked inside my place and saw that it was past midnight before stepping in the shower with a bag on my injured hand. I felt absolutely filthy after spending hours at both a hospital and a police station. That night, I accidentally slept on my bandaged hand and woke up much earlier than I should have to take some pain meds and call off from work. I was exhausted, but I couldn't go back to sleep. Instead, I browsed the web on my laptop and looked up the case of the missing teens by the name of the town. It didn't take long to find an article detailing everything to know about the case. Skimming through names and last whereabouts, I looked for details of the car they were last seen in. Article mentioned a red Chevy truck. Pretty sure we saw one in that big parking lot, but Chevy trucks aren't exactly uncommon, I then thought, debating with myself. Whatever the officers had found when they had the road blocked was not mentioned in any articles. It was not yet known to the public. After less than a day, it was safe to assume it was still under investigation. I opened Google Earth and looked up the town again, scanning the logging road thoroughly. Everything looked exactly the way we saw it in person until the end of the road. Once again, the road we took and came back from was not there. It seemed to not exist. I laid down and thought of more plausible explanations. Maybe that place is still under construction and not yet visible on maps. In that case, shouldn't it be inaccessible to the public, either fenced or gated? That still doesn't explain the cars and malfunctioning electronics. I told myself before falling back to sleep. My phone rang at around noon and woke me up. I picked it up and was greeted by a woman's voice, Frank's secretary. She was calling me to let me know that the person that carried the break-in I was almost framed for was found. She confirmed my case was pro bono. I would not be billed. It wouldn't be until a few days later that Frank himself would call me to let me know the body the search party found was actually the culprit I was thought to be, identified from a gash in his arm and brutally mauled by animals, with some of the stolen items still in his pockets and nearby backpack. I called both Andy and Dario after speaking with the secretary to relay to them what I had just been told, and they, just like me, were still pissed that we had lost all that time over a misunderstanding. Thankfully, the junkyard owner never filed a report against us, and a week later we asked and received the okay to upload our video. Just as we expected, the video did well. There was a lot of engagement from our fans, with some asking to know where this junkyard was. A few planned some sort of payback on our behalf that we persuaded them to call off. Good thing we've always kept our locations and destinations vague. We explained to our viewers that after trespassing on his property, the owner had made sure we knew we weren't welcome. Our injuries were our own fault after trying to hide and not outing our presence. It could be argued the man should have handled our intrusion better. But his dog had other ideas, and we did not want to escalate things further. We weren't exactly in the right. Soon our injuries will be healed. All we want is to continue creating content for our viewers with as little interruptions as possible. We've checked online trying to find worthwhile spots closer to home and safer. It's hard to do when all other places seem futile. None of US can get that parking lot out of our head and focus on a new location. No photo recovery software can bring back the pictures we took there. Keeping up on articles of the missing teens, we believe their disappearance has something to do with that mysterious place. There is never any mention or any trace of that place no matter where we look. I thought about calling to report that red truck I saw, but the place is massive and odds are they probably already found it. Flipped it on its heels and found nothing, right? Well, eventually the missing case went cold and nothing of note came forward. That is until a few days ago when somebody uploaded new individual pictures of each missing teen and one of them caught our eye. This reveal only added to our pile of questions. The picture was of the teen said to be driving the night of the disappearance. The photo showed him leaning in front of his bright red Chevy truck with shiny gold rims. Dario remembers it and argues that that very same truck is in that parking lot and insists that it was in one of the pictures he lost. We are now convinced we need to go back. Do authorities really not know that place? How could that be if a cop was the one that told us of that logging ground road? There is definitely something fishy going on. It being 3 hours away doesn't exactly make it easy for us to go there at random. More reason to plan it out and be ready, I guess. We now know better and understand the importance of downloading offline maps. We've ordered Polaroid cameras to try to get around the glitching issue. If we can't get footage, at least we'll have photos. This time we are going to make sure we get there during the day to check out that place fully with little to no disruptions. That place being a well taken care of paved junkyard or still under construction business lot are the most probable reasons we can think of for why it wouldn't be visible on maps. Those are the assumptions we've decided on. There is no doubt in our minds this won't make for great content. Dario and I are not yet fully healed, but when we are, we will set a date and ask for the days off from work. The thing is, we don't exactly know how to go about this. On one hand, helping authorities in solving the case will be huge for our channel. At the same time, we have no desire to notify the authorities just yet. There's a chance this is a case that is being pushed under the rug for one reason or another. We installed a police radar in the car to help with this. For now, the plan is to simply drive back to the secret place and try to find that truck. Know that I plan on uploading this right before we go back to that town to avoid any further unwanted attention from readers claiming to know and or figure out where this place is. I will do my best to keep you all posted. If I don't offer any updates, well, just wait for our next video. The Missing Parking Lot, Part 3. I'm not sure where we ended up that night. Now I'm not sure I even want to know. We went back to the logging ground road and drove through it just like that night a few months ago, only now during the day, much more confident with daylight. The drive that took us 40 minutes that night took us closer to 20. Our jaws dropped when the end of the logging road presented us with only one right turn. It's not there. The road isn't there. It doesn't make any sense. Underscore. After planning out for 2 months, we finally decided on the days to take off from work to go back and check that place out. Thursday and Friday were the days we agreed on with Saturday, also off to get a good day's rest. There would probably be too many hikers if we went on the weekend. Better chance of having the whole road and lot to ourselves during the week, we thought. If that parking lot or road happened to be closed off, somehow we were going to sneak in through the forest. No matter what, we were going back to that place. We crossed our fingers hoping we wouldn't lose reception on our radios, and each also took a Polaroid camera in hand. We would explore the massive lot separately to cover more ground. With sunlight and no fog, we figured it would be a breeze. We had 2 main goals in mind: to obtain pictures of that truck and its license plates, and to find and photograph anything that might indicate or clarify exactly what that place was. All this, of course, while not getting caught. We rented a pickup truck and headed back to that town. Leaving at 7:30 a.m., we got there a little past 9:30 a.m., choosing our routes carefully, and with it being a Thursday, there was much less traffic, and it pretty much took us an hour less to make the trip. Even during the day, the logging ground road was very well obscured by the forest, and we almost missed the entrance. The 4 signs that served as warnings at night were nothing more than decorations during the day. Driving in without a second thought, the forest closing on us just like that night. Only now, instead of tense and anxious, I felt peaceful and relaxed. The area was picturesque, like driving into a painting. I can't believe this is the same road, Dario said from the back seat. It makes sense why it's so dark at night. With intense shade in this little road during the day, it only gets amplified at night, I said while driving. I think this is the area where the elk came up right in front of us, Andy said from the passenger seat. Yeah, I think it ran right out of there, I said, pointing to a spot of the forest that came and curved a little closer to the road on our right. Driving past the first hiking trail, an older couple who happened to be on foot raised an arm to greet us. After all this planning, I sure hope some of these hikers don't get in our way. The last thing we need is a nosy Karen or Kyle ruining it for us and notifying the authorities like last time. Dario said, "It wouldn't be them. They seem nice. The old man reminds me of my grandpa," I said, having just waved at them. "Well, they'd better mind their own business," Andy replied. Unfortunately, all our planning would go to waste, and it wouldn't be because of any hiker. I turned slightly to the left when we drove by 2 cars parked on the side of the road. They were parked mostly out of the way in between the forest and the dirt road. It looks like we can park anywhere to our right, as long as there's enough space on the sides of the road, Andy said, looking out his passenger window. Interesting that we haven't lost GPS signal yet, I said, looking at my phone. It was mounted to the dash and had been showing our location mostly uninterrupted since we started the trip. Huh? I still have phone service too. What about you, Andy? Dario asked, leaning forward to speak to us. I also have service. Everything is going the complete opposite of how it went last time, Andy said, looking down at his phone. When we neared the second hiking trail, I slowed down and saw that there were many more people out and about. Over 10 cars were parked on the side of the road. One of the parked cars was a van with a sign posted on its side that read $5 breakfast burritos. They had a line of about 6 people. "Let's stop and get some breakfast, guys. Support a local family trying to earn some cash. They got some clientele, that's a good sign. I bet those homemade burritos are good," Dario said. I do not want to get food poisoning over 2 hours away from home. Let's just head straight to the lot, eat the sandwiches and snacks we prepared, and grab a bite at a legit place after, I said, continuing forward. Hold on, this gives me an idea. Slow down and park here real quick, Andy suddenly said, pointing to the side of the road. After I parked, Andy loosened his seat belt and faced both me and Dario simultaneously. Why don't we try to ask the locals if they know of any RV parks or rest stops nearby? Get the scoop from somebody that lives here and likely knows of that lot, and what it could be Andy suggested. Dario and I liked the idea, and we all agreed to keep conversations as nonchalant as possible. We each got out of the car and headed in separate directions, trying to talk to different people. I headed towards a group that were eating in their car with their windows open. They had clearly been off-roading. "Hey, how's it going, man? You guys around these parts often?" I asked the man with his elbow hanging out the driver's seat window. "Yeah, man, we live about 30 minutes away. Why, what's up?" He then asked me, "Would you guys know of any big rest stops nearby?" Me and my friends are scoping out the place and planning on coming back and renting an RV. Are there any places where we can park our cars and RV within the next few miles? We are trying to stay as close to this beautiful hiking road as possible. I asked. Nah, man, not nearby. There's a Walmart that allows people to spend a night in their parking lot, but that's like 20 minutes away. All nearby campgrounds are tent only. There are no places to park such a large vehicle anywhere near here. He replied, "I believe there's an RV park on the north edge of town. That's almost an hour away from here, though." A guy sitting on the back seat added, "That's good to know, I appreciate it. We'll be sure to plan our RV trip a little better. You guys have a nice day," I said. "You as well. Good luck with that." The guys sitting on the driver's side said. A few nodded their heads and continued eating their burritos. I then walked toward the van selling the breakfast burritos and heard Andy mid-conversation with some hikers who were waiting in line. "Out there's only one way. Whoever told you there were two ways to go gave you wrong directions. This road ends at a closure. The other road that starts at a hard right turn is one you can use to head out of town, but to go back into town you need to head straight back. There is no other way to go." I heard one of the hikers finish telling Andy. "Appreciate the clarification." I then heard Andy tell the three hikers before looking over to me in a tight-browed expression. All the people we spoke to had nothing different to tell us, just like GPS systems. Even the locals had no idea and never heard of such a road or lot. I couldn't help but feel a certain level of unease when we walked back to our car. "All these people are nuts," Dario said, sitting back in the car. "The couple I spoke to don't know a thing. Clearly there's something right under their noses, and they don't have the slightest clue or knowledge of it," he said, putting the big burrito he bought in our lunchbox. "If they don't know of it, we'll likely have the whole place to ourselves. Better chance of not getting caught. Hopefully the place is as deserted as it was that night." Andy said, opposing Dario's pessimism. "With a lot of that size, I find it hard to believe there isn't somebody on guard at all times," I said, still expecting to have to sneak in. "I don't know. Let's just get this over with and check that place out," Dario said, frustrated. I then turned the car on, and we continued down the dirt road for a few more miles. The end of the current road and road split were just out of view. After driving to the last bend, it all finally came into perspective. The end of the current road and a singular tight right-hand turn. I felt my hands tighten on the steering wheel. It was not too like that night. Only one turn came up on our right. I hit the brakes and looked straight ahead, not believing what I was seeing. There were trees and tall foliage where the other road should have been. No sign of another road ever being there. We all looked at each other wide-eyed and shocked, unable to say a word. "Let's get out of the way before another car comes behind us," Dario finally said, looking out the rear window. We had been spacing out in the middle of the road for a few seconds. I swerved to the right and parked the truck on the side of the road, facing the entrance to where the other road should be. We sat in the car for a few minutes, still looking straight ahead, processing what we were seeing and what we had seen 2 months ago. I know the three of us were thinking about and wondering exactly what the hell we had stumbled into that night. But it was unexplainable, and there was no other way to put it. "There's no fucking way," Andy unexpectedly said loudly, opening the passenger door and walking out. Dario and I were trying to keep our composure. We both stepped out of the car and followed after Andy. Andy was a few feet away looking towards the forest, at the big trees that should not be there, trees that weren't there the night he drove. This is crazy. We made all the preparations for nothing. Did all three of us imagine that shit or something? Andy asked, looking down at the grass, putting his hands in his pockets in frustration. Neither me or Dario said a word. You guys see that? Dario said abruptly. He was glancing at a very well-obscured trail that happened to be about 20 feet from where we stood. When we walked over to it, we noticed it headed in the same general direction of the absent road. It looks like it heads the same way. Should we check it out? I mean, we need some content after making that 2-hour drive, Dario asked, seemingly ready to commit to the hike. This whole area is something else. I don't think we should go into the forest. Hell, I don't think we should spend the night and camp anywhere near here like we planned to do. I said, what do you suggest we do then? Just give up and head back home. Dario then asked. I didn't know what to say. We had stumbled into something paranormal in nature. As urban explorers, we fantasize about stumbling into anything out of the ordinary or unexplainable, but this was a little much to take in. The three of us were in our thoughts for a while, until a car came into view and we proceeded to act like nothing was wrong. It was a family of at least 4. They were riding in a big truck towing a camper trailer. They slowed down when we came into view. You guys good? I heard the driver ask out of the open passenger window, leaning forward to speak past his female passenger. Yeah, we are just taking it all in. It's a beautiful area, Dario answered. It really is, the man replied. If you're thinking of hiking that trail there, keep in mind it is a long one, but definitely worth it. It ends at an unbelievably wide natural open field. We hiked it a few years back. Just be prepared. He said, where you guys headed? Is there a rest stop nearby? I heard Andy ask without missing a beat. We are headed to a rest stop. It isn't anywhere near here, though, about an hour away, actually. The man answered. Well, thanks for the heads up. We are just going to hang around for a bit. Andy then said, take care now. Keep in mind this area tend to get dark real quick. We heard the man say as we watched his truck take the tight turn and continue down that road. So no one knows anything about that lot we stumbled into, Dario said after exhaling through his lips in frustration. I want to see this road again before we head back home. There's got to be a way to make it reappear. I don't want to necessarily drive in it. I just want us to have some kind of proof that we didn't imagine all of that just for our sake. Andy said decidedly. What are you suggesting? That we come back at night again or something? I asked, is there any other way? I can't think of anything else to do besides that. We owe it to ourselves and those teens to come back and figure this whole shit out, Andy answered. I'm game if you guys are. We all agreed that we would not leave empty-handed like last time. This isn't a whole lot more different than sneaking in like we planned, is it? Dario replied, as dumb as it was. We needed to figure out what it was that made this road appear. How do we make it reappear? What did we do? How did we manage to end up in a place that doesn't exist? We were not completely convinced that simply driving through the logging ground road at night would make it all reappear. If that was the case, more people would know of it. We were giving this a shot more so because we were out of options. You don't exactly have a lot of people to ask for advice when dealing with something so strange. The three of us were in and would be ready to go by the time night fell. Time flew by, and we spent over 4 hours hiking the 2 trails on the logging ground road. Taking it slow to kill time, we filmed and took pictures while making the trek. All the walking worked up our appetite, and we went through our day's worth of food supply right after. The remaining hours of sunlight were spent going over footage and resting the car at a nearby campground. Before the trees engulfed the last bit of sunlight, we drove to the closest gas station for refreshments. We also restocked on batteries for our flashlights while we were there. By the time we were driving back, it was already nighttime. Once again driving towards a logging ground road, we noticed the night was much brighter than the first night we drove through. The full moon produced light that illuminated the forest. The entrance was much less intimidating thanks to the brightness of the night, and the drive wasn't any different. The dirt road was easily visible thanks to our headlights and the absence of fog. We also never lost phone service, not until the end of the road. When we could finally see where the road ends, everything seemed to be exactly like that morning, a single right turn again. The other road was still not there like we had hoped. Only difference was as I parked as close as possible to where the missing road should be, we lost phone reception, leaving the headlights on for backup. We each got out of the car with our flashlights in hand, walking the direction of the missing road. Dario tried taking photos on his camera, and Andy tried doing the same on his phone. They both malfunctioned in much the same way as last time. There's something here. We are very close. We lose signal, but why only in this area now? Andy asked out loud, pointing to the area where the other road should be. He then started tugging and pushing on a few trees that happened to be in place of the road. What are we missing? I asked, trying to stay within the confines of the dirt and gravel the logging ground road happened to run over. Hold on now is our chance to test our Polaroids and see if they are affected by the signal loss, Dario said excitedly. He walked to the car and came back, holding one of the retro cameras in his hand. The familiar rainbow stripe that ran across it vertically seemed to glow thanks to the car's headlights. He then proceeded to take a picture of us in the forest right in front of where the other road would have been. The flash blinded me for a few seconds. He set the developing picture face down on the hood as we continued waiting and thinking of other possible ways to make this road appear. What did we do differently that night? I asked loudly. Dario walked back towards us looking down at his phone. Well, we are actually early. The night we drove through here was around 8:45 p.m. It is currently 8:12 p.m. Dario said, still looking at his phone, "You guys think the exact time matters?" I then asked, "It makes sense. The best thing we can do now is try to replicate everything we did that night." Andy said, emphasizing what Dario had just mentioned. Deciding to wait in the car, we walked back and stepped inside our vehicle. Dario grabbed the picture from the hood and examined it in the back seat after turning on the truck's interior lights. "Oh man, you guys gotta see this," Dario said, handing me the photo. I looked at the photo closely and saw that a section of trees and foliage behind me and Andy were almost see-through. You could just barely make out the entrance to the absent road behind the vegetation. Under normal circumstances, one would have thought the camera had simply malfunctioned. "What the hell, that's crazy," I said, handing Andy the photo. "Holy shit, now that's scary, but interesting. So I guess the road both is and isn't there. Those trees in the way are solid. Is all that foliage about to disappear before our eyes?" Andy asked, examining the photo. With nothing else to do but wait, we sat in the car, expecting to be allowed to wait the remaining 30 minutes. The chill in the air was making me fall asleep, so I turned off the truck's headlights and decided to take a quick nap. I was suddenly awoken by Dario 20 minutes later. He was budging my shoulder from the back seat. Both me and Andy had fallen asleep, while he had only laid down in the back cab. "Guys, wake up, there's a car coming," he said. "Damn it, what should we do?" Andy asked, still frustrated and not thinking straight after having just woken up. I rubbed my eyes and turned on the car, trying to think of something. Let's pretend we got lost, took a wrong turn or something. "Let me turn the car around," I said, making a U-turn. "Better not be a fucking cop like last time," I heard Andy say, just loud enough for me to hear. "Looks like a truck," Dario said, looking ahead in between Andy and I. The car was closing in on us, and we could tell from its headlights that it was definitely a truck or SUV. I moved forward slowly while the vehicle came towards us at a much faster speed one would expect. For somebody to drive like that on a rural road, they definitely knew the area, I thought to myself. As it got closer, we saw it was a white truck hauling an empty flatbed car trailer. The driver's side window was being rolled down as the truck slowed and approached us. I followed and also rolled down my window as our cars met heading opposite ways. "You lost us something?" the driver loudly asked out his window. "Yeah, man, I don't know where we ended up, but we're headed back the way we came," I said, lying to the man. I suddenly recognized him when I said that. His dog looked over to us from the back window. "Well, y'all better be careful. This area ain't exactly safe at night. Unless you're a local who knows the region, I'd say avoid this road at all costs, you hear? I've heard and seen of a fair share of accidents that have happened in this little road. Best to avoid it completely," he added. "Will do. Thanks," I then said. Before we started moving again, Andy, who had not yet recognized the man, asked him a question. Are you helping out somebody that broke down this late at night? I see you're ready to tow. Andy asked. Yeah, a buddy of mine broke down. Can't seem to get his damn car to turn back on. I'm cutting through this here road to get to him sooner. The man answered, Good luck with that man. We'll be on our way now, thanks, I said, breaking conversation, afraid he would recognize us soon. The man nodded his head and raised an arm in farewell. I drove out of there as fast as possible. Looking through our rear view mirror, I noticed he never moved. He was still parked in the same spot. We spoke to him when I finally lost sight of him through the trees. What are the odds? I asked loudly, almost laughing. Yo, Andy, did you not recognize him? I heard Dario ask from the back seat. Recognize who? What are you guys talking about? Andy asked us. That was a heavy-set junkyard owner. The dog that attacked us was in the back seat. I mentioned. No fucking way. I didn't even notice the dog, for real? Andy asked perplexed. Yeah, man, you're over here trying to be all friendly and start conversation with him. We were trying to get out of there before he recognized us. Dario said, laughing. That's my bad. I guess I'm still asleep, Andy said, cracking up. So what's the plan now? Are we coming back? Dario asked. Yeah, tomorrow night. For sure, let's avoid that road tonight. I do not want to run into that man again, I said, and they agreed. We then hit up a local fast food place for dinner. While Dario ate the big breakfast burrito he bought that morning. It was safe to eat and very good because he wouldn't shut up about it and never got sick. With camping still out of the question, we decided to stay somewhere to wash up and get some rest. We split the bill and spent the night at the closest decent-looking hotel. Being the driver, I called dibs on one of the two beds, while Andy slept on the other, and Dario reluctantly extended the sofa bed after losing to Andy in a dice game. We woke up fairly early Friday morning to take advantage of the free breakfast the hotel offered, talking about what we'd do differently while we ate. There was one thing for certain. We would not head over there until after 8 p.m. Dario also sensed something was up with the man from the junkyard when we stumbled into him. The three of us wondered what exactly he was doing driving through there at night. Andy looked up the man's junkyard on his phone, and we realized we weren't that far from it. Actually, we were about 35 minutes away according to one route. It suddenly seemed less odd that we had run into him. I guess the heavy forest and winding roads made it hard to tell we were so close to where it all went down. Hanging out in the hotel room for another 2 hours, we were out of there at noon. Cruising around for most of the day, we checked out interesting stores and spots that were aimed towards tourists to kill time. Growing increasingly bored and out of things to do, we decided to go out of our way and drive by the junkyard to feed our curiosity. It was a dumb idea, but we were in a different vehicle, and we agreed we would not step out of the car. We would simply drive past it. A little more relaxed when we saw he was not home, I turned the car around to get a better look and quickly head back the way we came if he happened to show up. I found it interesting that the confines of the junkyard were much more condensed with more old cars and auto parts covered with tarps layered throughout. In the 2 months we had been waiting to come back, I would say the junkyard had almost doubled its inventory. This man had been busy. We also saw he now had 3 dogs on guard, the one that attacked Andy, and 2 that we did not recognize. Dario took a few pictures of the premises from inside the truck. We were back in the direction of the logging ground road by the time the sun was beginning to set. With just over an hour left until we would drive through it again, we would try to wait in the same campsite as the day before. The night was oddly beginning to look very similar to the first night we drove through 2 months ago. It was now getting cloudy and the temperature had dropped at least 15 degrees in the last 2 hours. Fog was also beginning to form at a rapid pace, and the darkness of the forest was increasing drastically. For nearby campers, this might have been bad news, but for us, it meant everything was working in our favor. The weather was almost identical to that night. It was now up to us to replicate what we did back then. 45 minutes after impatiently waiting in the campsite, we finally headed back, admittedly getting excited and going over everything we did that night and how we would try to repeat it. Our conversation suddenly came to a halt when we drove past the junkyard owner again. The logging ground road was only a few miles away from us. This was no longer coincidence. We were sure he was coming back from there, driving his familiar white truck. We saw he was towing an old yellow VW Beetle when he drove past us. What the? Yo, that Volkswagen. Andy suddenly said loudly. What? I asked confused. That Beetle, he repeated. That Beetle was in that parking lot. He finally clarified. Wait, what, really? Are you sure? Dario asked him. Yeah, I learned how to drive in one of those. The same color, just not as old. I remember thinking that when I was driving to the cars in fog that night, I don't really see yellow Beetles very often. Andy replied. So what are you thinking? That he knows of that place. Dario then asked. He's got to know something. There's too many coincidences. We stumbled into him in the logging ground road at night, acting all shady, and now this. Andy said, clearly convinced, Hold on. One thing at a time, we need to figure this whole thing out. Now's our chance to drive through this road and see what happens. If he was really just in that parking lot, I don't think he's coming back anytime soon. I said try and stay focused. I turned on the truck's high beams just as we approached the logging ground road. Visibility was bad, although not as bad as the first night we drove through. At least not yet. I entered the dirt road without hesitating and hit the gas. We got no service, boys. Everything is falling in place. I heard Dario say after checking his phone. Wait. Slow down. We need to do everything as precisely as possible. Remember, I was going less than 20 miles per hour for the first few miles until the elk came up in front of us. Andy said, beginning to go into detail of how he drove that night. I slowed down and continued steadily forward. I hit the brakes when we got to the stretch of road where the elk came up in front of us. I completely stopped for a few minutes while Dario took pictures of the general area where the elk would have been. I then honked and continued on even slower than before, as instructed by Andy. Dario enthusiastically confirmed the photos he had just taken weren't saved. If the missing path didn't show itself at the end of the road after our interpretation that night, then we would be out of options, out of ideas, out of our minds. I followed and did everything as close as possible to what Andy detailed, and we remembered. The road looked exactly the way it did the night we stumbled into that parking lot. The darkness that seemed to blend the trees and night sky, the fog, the dust coming up and affecting our visibility, even the time. Everything seemed to match. We truly believed that the rules and steps we had come up with would make this road reappear. Unfortunately, it didn't seem to work. It felt like it had happened dozens of times before. We were once again dumbfounded in the middle of that road. Thinking of other ways, I was mentally grasping at anything that came to mind. Suddenly, I remembered something we forgot to do. I started switching the car headlights on and off a few times the shadows of the trees, and foliage seemed to dance in front of us. What are you doing? Andy asked, watching me fiddle with the lever. You did this to make the elk get off the road, remember? How many times? I then asked him. Oh, yeah, you are right. 2 or 3 times, I think. He said, trying to remember. I moved the switch up and down twice and nothing. I then moved the switch up and down 3 times each and froze. We all looked ahead and grew silent. Even the crickets and cicadas seemed to cease. The road had just appeared, and the entrance was now in front of us.